Special.
It's Friday, it's 1:45 and we're live in Westminster. A big victory for Labour in the Blackpool South by-election.
Directly to Rishi Sunak to say we're fed up with your decline, your chaos and your division, and we want change.
Conservatives also suffer big losses in the local elections.
Obviously, it's disappointing to lose good, hard-working Conservative councillors, and I'm grateful to them for all their service in local government, keeping council tax low and delivering services for local people. But we've still got lots of results to come as well.
But there's some comfort for the Conservatives. Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchen is re-elected. Professor Sir John Curtis is with us analysing all the electoral trends. And I'll be hearing from correspondents at counts up and down the country, politicians and commentators from across the political spectrum. But Nick Eardley is there at the screen for us with all the latest.
Yeah, Joe, I'll be crunching all the numbers as they come in. There are still a lot of results left today. Mayors, councils and police commissioners.
With me for this part of the programme are the BBC's Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young, and we're also joined by the Secretary of State for Transport there, Mark Harper. Joining us newly for this part of the programme is Jonathan Reynolds for the Labour Party Shadow Business Secretary and Director of Communications for the Liberal Democrats, Ollie Grender. Welcome to all of you. This is Politics Live. And welcome to you all. Yes, we had that big, important result, certainly for the Conservatives. Ben Houchen has held on to the Tees Valley mayoralty for a third term. You will know, if you've been watching and following all the election results, that Labour have won with a pretty historic swing the Blackpool South by-election. There are a lot of people, of course, still coming in. We've yet to hear from counts right across the country in terms of those local councils. Let's just get a thought, first of all, from our panel. Mark, obviously, you were with us a little bit earlier, but so far, how disappointed are you?
Well, look, on some of the council losses, clearly it is disappointing when you lose hard-working Conservative councillors. I said that a little bit time ago, but very pleased, obviously, with Conservative Ben Houchen's strong win in the Tees Valley mayoralty, where he won in all 5 boroughs in that area. That's a strong win. I will repeat, because I said it earlier, he campaigned very strongly as a Conservative. That's a strong win for us, and he has a strong record of delivery, and I think that's a good lesson for us about how you win those elections.
Right, we are expecting a declaration shortly in the North East. That's a new mayoral position. How important is it for Labour that you win that?
Well, it's a key part of the country. It's a key race, a new position, very powerful one. I think it'll play a significant role in the national life of the UK. So I think Kim McGuinness has been a superb candidate, and I really want to see, her elected. I think what we've seen so far, obviously, look, it's a really encouraging picture for Labour, because in the key battlegrounds in the country that will determine the next election, you're seeing Labour overcome and beat the Conservative incumbent. If you look at what would happen, even in a place we haven't won the mayoral contest, we'd win every parliamentary constituency in that area. And I would just say, and Mark knows I'm going to say this because we had a bit of a conversation about this last night, but look, when Labour candidates go out, they wear their rosettes with pride. Ben Houchen couldn't even put a blue rosette on. That tells you quite a lot about how they've campaigned and, the problems and the perceptions of the government, which will be a driving factor into the general election next year.
Mark?
Well, look, I'm not going to whip out my leaflet again, which has Conservative branding all over it, which I was pushing through letterboxes in Darlington from Ben Houchen. So this Labour attempt to pretend Ben didn't campaign as a Conservative is nonsense. It's utter nonsense. And we saw earlier when your colleague Ellie Reeves was on, and she was trying to make a big distinction between the West and the East Midlands. Our candidates campaigned as Conservatives. Conservatives was on the ballot paper. And, trying to take away from their win, I don't think is very sensible. But look, I'm not going to pretend. We've got a job of work to do here this year.
Have you got time?
We have to...
That's what people will be asking. Have you really got time? These are not midterm elections, because quite often governing parties say... I know you haven't.
I haven't said that.
No, you haven't, but others have. Say these are midterms. Not midterms. We're months out, possibly, from a general election. One might have expected that with the national polls putting the Labour Party consistently 20 points ahead of the Conservatives, there might have been some evidence of narrowing. There might have been some evidence of Conservative voters coming out in force. But there isn't that evidence yet. That is an important victory, Ben Houchin in the Tees Valley, but it's a mayoral. But the council... No, I'm not diminishing it. But in terms of the council elections, and council elections are different, but they are quite often seen as the sort of testbed barometer of what could happen.
Well, that's only because mayoralties are relatively new. But look, what I would argue is this. I accept the polls are what they are, but they're a snapshot, not a prediction. No. The reason why I'm mentioning Ben's victory is that was a seat, that was a mayoralty that Labour was very keen to gain. When I was up there last week, actually, Keir Starmer was there on the same day. I think half the shadow cabinet have been to the Tees Valley. They were absolutely throwing everything at it, as Ben said in his interview. They thought they had a chance of winning it, and they didn't. He won it comfortably. He won every borough in that mayoralty. So I don't agree with your contention that we would have lost all the seats.
Although, as we heard from St John Curtis, that actually in Hartley, well, of course, Labour
there was a different result in the council elections. So the point I'm making is we're getting better results than the polls would say in places like Tees Valley. But I wouldn't disagree that there is, of course, a big job of work for us to do to focus now on setting out two things. Our record, where I would argue on things like delivering tax cuts that we're now delivering for working people, getting inflation down, a number of months now of real terms income growth. Got to set those out for people, but also then set out what we would deliver if we were to win the election. Big job of work to do, but I absolutely think we can do it.
Where would you say now, Ollie, at this point, because there are more results, a lot more results to come in terms of council elections. The Liberal Democrats are looking at some of those, what we call blue wall areas, where you want to take seats at the general election from the Conservatives.
Which are classic Conservative, Liberal Democrat battlegrounds. A lot of those are going to come as late as 9:30, 10 o'clock this evening. So, as Daisy, I think, has already said here, the best is yet to come. It's a Sinatra refrain, I think, for us at the moment. But, Mark, come on. In Dorset, we saw a leaflet where the local party was saying, you know, we disagree with the Westminster Conservatives. You know, there are examples of where your party on the ground is trying to disown its own government at the moment. In Dorset, by the way, we're very hopeful of moving forward and making quite a lot of progress there, but it will come much later in the day.
Well, we will be watching and see if there are any results in terms of taking councils. You haven't done so yet. You've held on to the ones that
we have, and we've held against Labour in Hull, for instance,
we've been talking a lot.
Good night for Labour.
Well, we've been talking a lot about the mayoral contest. Let's continue, because they are big headline-grabbing results and contests. Let's talk to Pete Sewell, who is in Nottingham at the East Midlands mayoralty contest and count. Pete, how close are we to an announcement there?
Well, Joe, we probably will get the official declaration in the next half an hour to an hour, I'd have thought, but Labour have already called this mayoralty. They say that their candidate, Claire Ward, former Labour MP during the Blair and the Brown years, has won this contest, quote, comfortably. Ben Bradley was the Conservative candidate. He's been fairly despondent, I have to say, speaking to him earlier on today. He is yet to concede, but certainly the expectation is I don't think Labour would be putting out a statement like that if they weren't 100% confident that they had won this contest. And the thing that Labour are pointing to is the fact that this part of the world, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, contains an awful lot of the key general election battlegrounds, seats like Ben Bradley's own one in Mansfield, Bassetlaw, Ashfield, Bolsover, Amber Valley. These are the kinds of seats that will ultimately determine who ends up in power at the general election. So Labour are really keen to put attention on this contest here. I think also it'll be interesting to see when we get the results how well Reform UK have performed. This is the part of the world where Reform have their own MP, remember, their only MP in Lee Anderson in Ashfield, although of course he was elected as a Conservative in 2019, and their candidate actually in the East Midlands, Alan Graves, is a councillor in Derby. I'm told that Reform have performed quite well in that part of the world. It may well have been a factor in what looks like a fairly comfortable victory for the Labour Party here, but certainly the Conservatives started this contest with high hopes that they'd be able to win here. The difference between Ben Bradley and perhaps his counterparts like Ben Houchen and Andy Street in other parts of the country is that he's not an incumbent. And although he's tried, like they have, to distance himself from the National Party and talk up his own personal credentials, it hasn't really worked here because he's not been able to establish that apolitical identity for himself.
I mean, Pete, it will be very disappointing as far as Ben Bradley is concerned, although he already has a couple of jobs as MP and leader of Nottinghamshire Council. But for Labour, surely they had to win this mayoralty, and in order to have a chance at the sorts of seats you've just been describing. Otherwise, they wouldn't really be plausibly on course to get a majority or win the election.
Yeah, I think of all the mayoralties up and down the country, actually, this one was arguably the most important for the Labour Party because there'd never been an East Midlands mayoral before. As you say, these seats here are really, really important. We will, I'm told, get some breakdown by boroughs and districts, which largely correspond with the constituency areas. So it'll be interesting to see what the margin of victory is for Labour in places like Bassetlaw, Mansfield, Amber Valley, even Rushcliffe, which is a traditional Conservative stronghold, Ken Clarke's former constituency. That is an area that Labour are really targeting hard at the general election. So yeah, really, really important, this one for Labour. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Ben Bradley was hoping that his credentials, as you say, as the leader of Nottinghamshire County Council, he was pretty important in negotiating the devolution deal with the government that has ended up with this election here. He was hoping that that would help him out, but he seems to have just been swept away by the national prevailing mood today.
Right, thank you very much. Pete Stall there in Nottingham will bring you that result when it comes. What do you say in response to that Ben Bradley seems to, but we don't know for absolutely sure the result, Labour are calling it, but swept away by what's happening nationally?
Well, look, I don't know the results, so if you'll forgive me, I'm actually going to wait to see what it is before I comment on it. On the point about his campaign, he absolutely campaigned. I'm going to disagree again about this idea that he somehow was pretending he wasn't a Conservative. He's a Conservative MP. He campaigned as a Conservative. I was up, again, campaigning with him just very recently on some of the things that we're delivering.
And why do you think then he hasn't cut through? It looks as if he hasn't cut through enough, rather than the sort of dispute as a Conservative. Yes, he's a Conservative MP, but in terms of being let down there because he didn't have the benefit of incumbency.
Well, look, if he hasn't won, that would obviously be very disappointing. I think he would have been a very good candidate. But look, I want to wait and see what the results are. But he ran a very strong campaign. I think he set out very clearly what he wanted to achieve with the resources that he would have at his disposal as East Midlands Mayor. And if he hasn't won, it'd be very disappointing. But I'm going to wait and see the results first. I'm happy to comment on the results we've had rather than speculating on the ones we haven't actually had yet. And it sounds like I'm still going to be on the programme when it will come, and I'll happily talk about it when we've actually had it.
Well, I do hope so. I'll hold you, obviously hold you. You are a bit old-fashioned, aren't you? But anyway, we'll stick with you for now, Mark Harper. I mean, Jonathan Rales, it's true. You had to win. You have to win.
It's an important
places
one.
like
It's a really important one. I mean, it's an area which is not just, it starts actually on the border of my constituency. You've got High Peak, a classic bellwether marginal and general elections, and then as we said from the count there, the kind of places where Labour had traditionally been in power, but had really lost the support of people in the past, the Mansfields, the Bassetlaws. Winning those back, winning that area, would be one of the most significant results of this set of elections, if that is what indeed the result turns out to be.
And what about the issue of levelling up? The issue that certainly won the Conservatives under Boris Johnson an awful lot of support, regenerating parts of the country, like the Tees Valley, like the East Midlands. What is Labour promising?
Well, look, we think and acknowledge the success of that in the 2019 election. I think what you are seeing in the results, though, is after 14 years of Conservative government where a huge amount of money has been taken out of local public services, local authorities, and yes, you've had these top-ups of 20 million here and there based on, factors more than just, let's say, objective ones in terms of where some of that money has gone to. That isn't the comprehensive set of promises the people were offered in 2019. And it's certainly, you add that to, the fact that a lot of people around Brexit thought they were getting lower immigration and a stronger economy. They've got a stagnant economy and higher immigration. You go back to that coalition that was so successful for the Conservative Party in 2019, it's just not there anymore.
Well, look, just picking that point up, and it came up in our earlier discussion about long-term settlements and things like that. Actually, one of the really important things we did with the decision to cancel the second phase of HS2 and reinvest all of that money into transport was actually in the North and the Midlands, we have given councils significant commitments of resources for the long term, and that's only going to happen if we win the election, because Labour...
controversial, Mark Harper, you lost so much support when you cancelled that.
No, I don't agree.
Well, Andy Street himself,
I don't agree with that.
who wants to stay as West Midlands Mayor, said so.
We've said we're going to reinvest all that money in transport. We've made big commitments in the local transport fund to councils across the North and the Midlands. They've welcomed that, including Labour-led councils, and Labour haven't said they would deliver that money if they were to win the election.
This is money deferred from some point in the future. Mark, at the end of the day, you are a government that can't build a railway between Manchester and London, and you were elected on levelling up.
This is indecision and flip-flop, which throws businesses, and it was businesses that were relying on the delivery of that promise.
All right.
And abandoning that promise was the wrong thing to do.
Let me introduce Salma Shah, her former Conservative advisor to a number of Cabinet Ministers. Welcome to you to the programme. On the basis of what we know, in terms of the loss of councils, loss of Conservative control of councils across the country, but they've won and held onto the Tees Valley, Ben Houchen in for a third term. How important is that to morale within the Conservative Party and shoring up Rishi Sunak's leadership?
Well, I think the indication was from earlier in the week where you saw Number 10 basically saying, oh, well, you know, don't discount everything. The mayoralties, you know, will stay strong. And that's an indication of support behind the Conservatives. So the government had already sort of set that stage to say that this is going to be meaningful and significant for us. So I think with that expectation, people will feel, if not buoyed, then certainly not as stressed as they might have been in a different scenario.
I mean, when it comes to any threats to Rishi Sunak's leadership, we know that there have been a lot of noises off. We know that there are two MPs who've openly and publicly said they've put in letters of no confidence. But beyond that today, is there a feeling that actually that is not building in any way, or certainly not obviously from anything that we've seen and heard?
I think the issue is that the sort of critical mass that you need in terms of numbers have not, you know, come together in any decisive way. There isn't a campaign, and critically, there isn't a candidate who is going to replace Rishi Sunak in this scenario, and therefore, I don't think that any rebellion could really take off.
Vicky?
In terms of reaction from Conservatives, Johnny Mercer has tweeted, and then it seems to have deleted a tweet. So it's a map of Plymouth, his constituency in Plymouth, showing lots of red with a tiny bit of blue in the middle, saying, not a good night. Congratulations to all those who stood and those who won. This looks bad for me. Trouble is, it's all my favourite scenario. Isolated, backs to the wall, bring on the general election. That has been deleted, we think. That's disappeared. But, you know, in lots of places across the country, I think you can see why the Ben Houchen victory is so important to the Conservatives, because there would really be nothing positive to speak about if that hadn't happened. So if you look at the council results in all sorts of places, and you can see the reaction from some Tory MPs looking at those and extrapolating and saying, look, people are turning away from the Conservatives in massive numbers. The Conservatives at the moment are on course to lose half of the seats that they are defending. It's a terrible night for the Conservatives, but you can see why those tiny spots of brightness, there's one so far, is giving them something to say, something to cling on to, and it will give the Prime Minister something to say as well. And it could calm the fears of some Conservative MPs, and that could be, as we're saying...
Or they're resigned to thinking there's just not enough time to have another change of leader.
What did the former Defence Secretary say? March towards the gunfire.
Yes, and on that note, let's just... I think we can show you the pictures where we're expecting the result of the North East mayoralty, a new position, a new mayoral position. Labour will be confident that they've won there. The Police and Crime Commissioner, Kim McGuinness, is their candidate against the independent former Labour Mayor Jamie Driscoll, who was dumped by the Labour Party, to put it mildly. But let's catch up with the latest results and what we know so far with my colleague Nick Erdley at the touchscreen. Nick.
Hello, Joe. Let's start with that big picture, how it's all looking. And you can see here the pattern that we've been talking about all day is continuing. Labour are doing well. The Lib Dems at the moment are ahead of the Conservatives. They've done pretty well as well. It's proving to be a really bad set of results so far for the Conservatives. They have lost more than half of their seats so far. That means they're in line, as things stand, to be towards the upper end of expectations about how many seats they're going to lose. Senior Tories were worried that it could be as many as 500. This suggests that that is in play. And I should point out we're very close to the halfway mark, so the picture is really building up. Here's what it means in terms of councils. Labour have taken 3, the Conservatives are down 3, the Independents have put on 1. But, actually, firstly, let me just show you the vote share. You can see it for the Conservatives there. It's down 13%. Labour, the main beneficiary, some of the other parties putting on as well. But I thought it was worth trying to pick some of the results that have come in so far that tell us something interesting. And I think we should start with Tees Valley. You heard Mark Harper a few minutes there talk about how it was a good result for the Conservatives. On the face of it, yes, Lord Houchin holding on to the Tees Valley Mayor is a decent result. But this is what happened. He was coming from a high point, but look at that. The Conservatives are down 19%. The spoils being shared between Labour and the Lib Dems there. The most interesting bit, though, is this, the swing. 17% from the Conservatives to Labour. Now, here's a stat for you. If that happened across the northeast of England at a general election, it would mean the Conservatives would lose every seat they have in that region of the UK. So although the Prime Minister and Mark Harper are going to talk about Tees Valley being a good result for the Conservatives, it's only good to a certain extent. That is bad news for Tories in that part of the country. I also just want to show you something that we've picked up on in areas with a high Muslim population. So if we start over here, this is a reminder of what's happened to the vote share since 2021. The Conservatives are down, Labour are up 5% across the board with the results we have so far. But in areas with a high Muslim population, that's not the case. Look at that. Labour are down 20% in these areas with a high Muslim population. And as you can see, the Greens are putting on some of those votes, and so are independents. Some of those independents will be independents like the ones in Oldham, who used to be in the Labour Party and quit or were annoyed at Labour over its Gaza position. Could be George Galloway's party, the Workers' Party of Britain, over time as well. So although the broad picture that Johnny Reynolds is painting of Labour doing well is correct and the Conservatives are doing badly, I think in some parts of the country this might make Labour a bit nervous. In areas like the West Midlands, where if they're not getting their vote out, and this is happening in high Muslim population areas of the West Midlands, it might mean that Andy Street gets over the line in that race.
Nick Eardley, thank you very much. Just to go back to the overall pattern of seats, Mark Harper. I mean, the Tories have continued to lose a little over half of the seats that you're defending, and therefore you are on course at the moment to lose 500 seats. You're defending under 1,000. That will be pretty disastrous, won't it?
Well, look, I said quite openly, losing Conservative councillors, hard-working Conservative councillors, is very disappointing.
Yeah,
obviously,
it's the scale. It's the scale of the losses.
And I've campaigned with many of them, you know, over the years,
yeah.
and obviously it will be disappointing. I'm not going to pretend
it's more than disappointing when we're months out from a general election, isn't it? And in terms of what we've seen historically, performances of governing parties, what can change? What sort of miracle can you pull out of the bag in the months leading up to the general election on the back of these sorts of results? They're not a forecast, but on the back of these sorts of results to change and move the dial towards you and away from Labour?
Well, look, a couple of things. First of all, I do think you do need to look at... You can't just only look at the council results. Perfectly fair to look at them as well. But remember, historically, the mayoralties didn't exist, right? So we didn't used to look at them because they didn't exist. So I think you have to look at the council results and the mayoralties. And the Tees Valley one, as I said, was an area which Labour thought they could win, threw everything at it. Keir Starmer went many times and they didn't win it, right?
We've discussed that the read across is difficult from both points of view. But look at the council. Look at the council elections, because council elections are a good barometer of the state of popularity or not.
Yeah,
of usually the main parties. And if you are, let's say, we are 5-6 months out of a general election, you might have expected some closing of that sort of poll lead that Labour has held consistently. What I say is, what's going to change?
So look, the big difference between council elections and the general elections is the turnout, right? So I think the question for us is, if you look at the polls, there are a big chunk of people who voted Conservative at the last election, and they're currently saying they don't know who they're going to vote for. And the election's really going to come down to us being able to demonstrate to those people what we've achieved and what will be at risk if you voted Labour. And Ben Houchen, which I said I would come back to, made that point in his remark. And I said, the challenge for us is we've got to show the things we've delivered, and I think we've got a fantastic record in terms of what we've delivered on getting inflation under control, cutting taxes on working people.
But the point is, are people listening? Are people listening? You may have the best message ever communicated, but are they listening, Salma? Are Conservatives? I'll come back to you, but are people listening to what Mark Harper is saying?
I think one of the difficulties and one of the things that I think was exposed from this set of elections is it's not just the turnout that being low. I mean, it tends to be in locals and by-elections. It's actually that question of trust and that question of instability. So if you look at Hartlepool, you know, great victory for Labour, you know, quite an emotional victory for Labour. And it was a turnaround in 3 years where Keir Starmer 3 years ago is considering resigning over that result to coming to this. That's not that far away from where we were in 2019. So we are still dealing with a very volatile electorate. And I think that's a trend that hasn't been discussed. There are also policy issues here. The pandemic hasn't really been discussed. Now, is that a failure of the government not to talk about 2019 to now with this huge issue of the pandemic in the middle of it? And also, actually, the Green agenda, because something that surprised me was the Greens sort of taking Labour seats, especially in South Tyneside.
Right, Ollie.
But come on, Mark. I mean, if we can just get you to stop clinging to Tees Valley as the, you know, the little life raft that it is. Yeah, when you pull back and look at the bigger picture, what is very clear, especially in those fights that we're holding against the Conservatives, is you cannot even get your core activists out there. And a lot of your vote is otherwise switching, or your core activists are frankly staying at home.
All right. I'll just hold that thought, if you don't mind, Mark, because I'm afraid to bring you some bad news is the Bedfordshire Police and Crime Commissioner. We've just had the result. I may go to the North East Declaration. I think we're going to do that now.
Authority mayoral election on Thursday, May the 2nd, 2024, in the North East Mayoral Combined Authority, hereby declare that the number of votes cast is as follows. Paul Donaghy, 41,147. Jamie Driscoll, 126,652. Andrew Gray, 17,631. Aidan John King, 25,485. Kim McGuinness, 185,051. Guy Renner Thomas, 52,446. The number of rejected votes was 2,750, and that Kim McGuinness is duly elected to serve as Mayor for the North East Mayoral Combined Authority.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to apologise for the length of this list of thank yous because I don't believe in unsung heroes, so everyone's going to have to bear with me for a minute. First of all, I would like to thank the returning officer for overseeing this election. It really is a big, big election. And the staff, not just here in Sunderland, but across the region, who have diligently counted thousands and thousands and thousands of votes. Your work doesn't go unnoticed. I'd like to thank the police for keeping us safe, and also a more personal thank you from me to Northumbria Police for the time that I've spent with you as Police and Crime Commissioner and everything that you've achieved in that time, as well as my team at the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner over the last 5 years. And to the Labour Party team, to my agent Kate Bolger, thank you very, very much. My organiser Anya, you've done an incredible job. And to the whole team, Richard, Sam, Jane, Hope, Natalie, honestly, the list goes on. And I can't mention every single one of you, but I am so very, very grateful for your efforts. And to the campaign team of volunteers, to Chris, to Dan, to Fiona, to Emma, to Carl, to Vicky, you've just been incredible. And you've been with me every step of the way, some of you since I was standing for Police and Crime Commissioner, for which I'm really grateful. And of course, some of our wonderful MPs, to Catherine McKinnell, who encouraged me to ever stand for my first election in the first place, to Julie Elliott, who's just been so inspirational and a real mentor throughout all of this, and to the MPs, the Labour Party MPs across the region, you've been brilliant. To my family, when you stand for elections, you drag your family through it. You really, really, really do, and they have been with me through the ups and the downs. I've been so encouraged by my mum and dad, Lillian and Barry, who have just been incredible and so encouraging, and my husband, David, who I mean, I don't know how I'm still married, but thank you very, very much for this.
Right, we're going to leave Kim McGuinness there. She is the Mayor of the North East, the Labour Mayor of the North East, having won that contest against the independent Jamie Driscoll, giving her victory speech there, thanking everybody she knows and who was involved in that campaign. That's a big victory for Labour, perhaps not unexpected, although quite a strong challenge. Let's show you the figures. She won with just over 185,000 votes to Jamie Driscoll, who was on 126,500 votes. Congratulations to Kim McGuinness and the Labour Party. But again, I mean, it certainly was one you had to win, wasn't it?
Well, I'm absolutely delighted by that. I really am, because you've got this added element there where it was a Labour versus independent contest. I very strongly believe Labour did the right thing in its candidate selection. That sometimes isn't always easy to do for a political party, but I do contrast, for instance, the approach we took in the North East with how I see with no offence to you, Mark, a Conservative Party that doesn't do that has too many extreme views in it, doesn't stick to the mainstream, and how that pulls sensible people like you to the extremes when you're talking about 15-minute cities and that sort of thing. We have focused on the kind of, genuine, reflective, working-class view, middle-class view in the northeast of England, and Kim represents that, and that's a cracking victory for us. That really
right, I mean, she is the first Mayor of the North East. I mean, it's interesting, she'd been a police and crime commissioner for quite some time. Talking about the sorts of campaigns that you run, Jamie Driscoll, independent. He was, of course, a former Labour mayor in one of the old positions. And when we talked to him, he had a pretty strong standing there. You can't forget, can you, Jonathan, or at your peril that you do as a Labour Party, forget those who are perhaps to the left.
It's always about building as wide a coalition as you can, but you can't, therefore, I think, not have regard for where the limits of that at times should be. And I think the approach that we have taken, the results that we're getting in, look, in most of the contest we're seeing, it's Labour versus someone else, isn't it? Labour is the genuinely UK-wide, every part of the country, rural, urban, suburban, we're the party that brings it all together, and we face competitors who only have to focus on maybe a smaller set of the electorate, where even that's with regard to the Conservative Party.
Well,
and we're keeping that national coalition together, and some of the results we're seeing are incredibly encouraging as an endorsement of that.
Right, well, whether you're keeping them together or rebuilding them, having lost there, because let's remind voters, the North East, let's just show this Labour win by Kim McGuinness and the share of the vote. Those are the votes, first of all, overall. There she was, winning with just over 185,000. But I think we can show the share compared to independent and Conservatives, 41% to 28% to the independent candidate, former Labour candidate Jamie Driscoll, and 12% for the Conservatives. This does come back to that alliance, that historic alliance, and that pretty stunning majority that was won by Boris Johnson in 2019, because he was able, as Prime Minister, to win in areas like the North East, in what we used to call, and still do, former red wall areas, former areas that Labour had been dominant in. Is that gone away? Has that alliance crumbled, Mark?
No, I mean, I don't think we were expecting to win that seat.
No,
that
but
was
it's a low...
That was a competition between Labour and a former Labour person. And as I said, if you want to look at red wall areas, yes, I am going to say Labour won that one, we won Tees Valley. Those are both red wall areas where I think it demonstrates the Prime Minister continued the appeal in the Tees Valley.
Right. Can we talk about Tamworth?
You can.
In Staffordshire. So our reporter in Tamworth is saying that a Tory source is expecting all 10 seats contested to go to Labour. That would be 10 straight seats from the Conservatives to Labour, which would take the council from no overall control if that happens. And then there's John Curtis doing some BBC analysis on the PCC elections, Police and Crime Commissioners. With 10 PCC contests now declared, there's a swing so far, 5.5% swing from Conservatives to Labour since 2021. And BBC analysis suggests that that would be enough for the Conservatives to lose up to 11 of the PCCs that they are defending. So that's about 1 in 3.
Right. I mean, that'll be a very poor result on those police and crime commissioners.
We've had a few of those results, but interestingly, if you take that, the swing, though, no, but the swing is much smaller in those than it is in the council elections. So I think all I'm saying is there are a range of elections that were up and we're going to have over the rest of today and tomorrow. Council seats, mayoralties and police and crime commissioners. Different results in all of them. So I just think you have to be a bit careful with using your language, the read across. It's a more complicated picture, lots of local factors.
It is.
And as I said, I still think a lot of work for us to do. I'm not pretending there isn't.
It's more than a lot, I think, isn't it?
I think
it's a mountain to climb.
The other thing I was going to cover, which you touched a little bit on your conversation with Salma, about voters and them listening. Look, most people who, are not like us, because we're all here in a studio talking about politics, Jonathan and I were doing it overnight as well. Most people don't focus on this until they get to a position of making a choice.
No,
And general elections are high turnouts with lots of engagement from people and a lot of voters. It'll only be as we get through the summer and we get into the autumn that they really start focusing on the choice. And that, I think, is the opportunity for us to make sure that when they focus on the choice, they look at the plan we've got that is working, and they don't want to throw all that progress away with the Labour Party.
They want that choice now. That's what we're finding. That is what this overall takeaway from this entire next 2-3 days of results will be, is that people want a general election and they want it tomorrow and they want to...
This is the third year in a row
don't talk over each other.
This is the third year in a row, Mark, where the person in your position, the Conservative spokesperson, has been here to say, look, it's Conservative voters that haven't really decided to come out. They just abstained. We're going to get them back. At what point are they going to come back? Because that's not the results that we're seeing. We're seeing by-elections with massive swings to Labour. That Blackpool result last night, historic. I mean, the third highest swing since the Second World War. That's people transferring from one side to the other.
No.
And I feel sometimes we'll be sitting here on a general election, and if Labour were to win, you'll say, oh, it's a terrible result for Labour still. I mean, at what point is this going to have...
But it was traditionally Labour, of course, before Scott Benton won it.
Blackpool, no.
Let me come back to that by-election, though. The two things. That seat... you're right, Joe. Other than before 2019, for 20 odd years, it was held by the Labour Party. Actually, even when we were in government.
70% of its existence.
So that's the But you're going right back to the 40s.
Why are you
over the last
about
20 years?
It's time we relive that argument.
On your point about this swing piece.
Yeah, but let me just interject, because on what you are saying, when you are pointing to voters not really focusing yet. On the general election. But let's just show you this Police and Crime Commissioner result in Bedfordshire, because Labour have gained it from the Conservatives. Yet another part of the country, arguably, where the Tories have been strong, but of course you lost the Mid-Bedfordshire by-election, and that was a pretty stunning win for the Labour Party. Well, their candidate for Police and Crime Commissioner has taken it, John Tizard, and in fact, Festus Akinbuso was the candidate, if I remember rightly, for the Conservative Party at the Mid-Bedfordshire by-election. Well, he's been pipped to the post again in the Police and Crime Commissioner position. We can have a look here at the share of the vote, 40% to Labour, 35% to the Conservatives, and the Labour, Liberal Democrats, I should say, on 16%. Let's look at the change. That is the change in the party's support. Well, it's gone up by 5% to the Labour Party. It's down 7% for the Conservatives, and you can see, the Workers' Party of Britain have gone up from 8%, obviously from a pretty sort of non-existent bar. And you can see there the swing, just over 6% from Conservative to Labour. So that is a Labour gain from the Conservatives. Let's just pick up, because we've talked a lot about the mayoralties. We haven't talked that much about police and crime commissioners. Let's catch up with Sir John Curtis on the results that we have had just now on police and crime commissioners, and looking ahead, because there are a lot of results we're expecting, aren't we?
Yes, indeed. We've only had about a third of the police and crime commission elections so far. I think Mark Harper is right that so far at least the swing from Conservative to Labour since 2021 is less than the local council elections, though I think that may in part be, though only part, be accounted for by Wales, where the Conservative vote, where it's starting off from a relatively low base, doesn't seem to have gone down so much as you might expect elsewhere. That said, on our, calculation, we still think it's possible that the Conservatives could lose around 1 in 3 of the PCC offices that they're trying to defend, and they've already lost 3. So that could amount to as much as 10 that they lose, because there are quite a few of these areas which are potentially vulnerable to something like a 5% swing. The other thing to say is that if we were arguing about turnout, the police and crime commissioner elections are the ones where if you don't have a corresponding local government election, which is true on a number of these, at least either in whole or in part, then the turnout does indeed tend to be particularly low.
Can you take us through Tamworth? Because Vicky Young was reading out the results. They probably have come from you. But can you explain the importance and the significance of Labour taking those council seats in a part of the world like Staffordshire, which, again, they need to be making quite a lot of progress in?
Well, yes, but of course Tamworth is where the Labour Party secured one of its spectacular by-election victories. I think we would have all been surprised, given the state of the opinion polls, if the Labour Party didn't win Tamworth Council.
Right. I mean, is that, though, a trend and a pattern that has been shown by the results that we've had so far across the country, whether it is Rushmore or Redditch or Hartlepool or Thurrock, that they are making enough progress overall, Labour?
Well, no, it depends on how you want to answer that question. So we've aggregated the results up to new parliamentary constituencies in places where Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrat fought all the wars, because that's quite a crucial qualification. Now, if you do that, I mean, the safest seat that Labour have picked up, i.e. that they're ahead on these local elections, is Swindon North in our set, which requires a 14% swing, which is a bit more than Labour need in order to be able to win a general election, at least on the conventional arithmetic. However, there are a couple of places, Peterborough and South Ribble, where the swing required is rather less than Labour would be required, I thought, to win on the conventional arithmetic, where the Conservatives are still ahead. So it's a bit of a mixed picture there, though what is perhaps of most interest perhaps to Mark Harper is that we can do this exercise for Portsmouth North, and the Conservatives there were narrowly ahead in the local elections, and that, of course, is Penny Mordaunt's seat. But I think there is another way of answering this question, which is the way that I would prefer to answer it, which is rather than trying to look to see what happens in constituencies that have a certain characteristic, is to look to see what's happening in wards that have a certain characteristic. In other words, let's look to see what happens in wards where Labour was second to the Conservatives, and what you then discover is that these are the places where Labour are advancing most strongly since 2021. And then let's go to the places where the Liberal Democrats are second to the Conservatives locally, and that is where they are advancing most strongly. In other words, as was the case last year, if you look at the tactical situation at the ward level, and it is the ward level that the tactical situation operates in these local elections, what you do again discover is beginning to be fairly consistent evidence that the Conservative Party is at risk of suffering anti-Conservative tactical voting. And if you want to know why it is that at the moment we are saying it looks as though the Conservatives could indeed lose 500 seats. Well, it's A, because of the decline, the rise of anti-Conservative tactical voting. It's B, also because the Conservative Party is losing ground most heavily in wards where they were previously strongest. Again, another pattern that was in evidence last year, and it was those two patterns last year that delivered 1,000 Conservative losses, and it may be those two patterns that this year also ensures that the forecast of 500 losses also proves to be pretty close to the truth.
Oh, well, Sir John Curtis, thank you very much for all of that important analysis, particularly in terms of the rise of anti-Tory tactical voting. That is very difficult, isn't it? You've got a pincer movement, which is not, I suppose, not the first time it's happened, but in the places where the Liberal Democrats are second to you, where Labour is second to you, in places across the country.
Yes, we obviously fight elections across the whole country, not just in parts of them, and we have to make make a strong case. Now, the point I want to come back to is what I said earlier about this point about swing. If there are low turnout elections, the question is it Conservative voters coming out and voting but deciding to vote for someone else, or is it Conservative voters not clear about what they're going to do and staying at home? And I would argue, if you look at the results, I'm not pretending, I'm not trying to pretend
but you're
that
trying
it's
to
not
make
a
an
disappointing
argument.
thing.
Yes.
I'm trying to say that there are Conservatives who, at the moment, in the elections that have taken place at the moment in many parts of the country, we haven't given them sufficient reason to come out and vote. That was the point Ben Houchen was making. And I'm saying what we've got to do between now and the general election is to get those Conservative voters to come out and vote for us. At the moment, they absolutely have not decided to vote Labour, and that is a big difference to where we were.
You think only Labour voters are voting in these elections?
But if you look at the overall results in seats where Labour's done well, often the Labour vote hasn't gone up very much, if at all, and in some cases it's gone backwards. That means
if turnout goes up, it won't go for everyone. It'll just go for you. I mean,
their voters are turning out better.
All right. Well, that's your argument, and I'm not dismissing it.
So we've got work to do.
You really have.
I don't pretend that we don't.
But let Jonathan answer that point of that argument. But first of all, can I introduce our new guest for this part of the programme, Andrew Fisher, columnist at The Eye, former Labour advisor when Jeremy Corbyn was Labour leader. Jonathan, you want to answer this point that the turnout, which is always, you know...
The third year in a row, this has been the main Conservative point. Look, the idea that when you have a lower turnout, it's only one side's or other political parties voting and your side isn't. If turnout goes up, it probably will mean everyone's vote goes up proportionally. So I understand it's a line that might get you through difficult media. Right? I mean, I've been in similar positions before, Mark. I genuinely respect how difficult it can be at times. But the idea that that is the answer, look, that is just not what we are seeing. We're seeing incredible swings to Labour in key battlegrounds. We're seeing by-election results off the scale of our expectations. We're seeing, I think, as you said quite rightly, the public very keen that they want a general election. They're frustrated about being denied a general election. Could have had it yesterday, let's be clear. I think, you know, there's no complacency on the Labour side, but this is very encouraging for the general election.
All right, well, let me just show you this result, because there has been some pressure. Admittedly, Labour have held on to Blackburn, but there has been some pressure there on the Labour Party, and there is, to some extent, disenchantment, and this comes from disenchantment with the Labour's policy when it has come to a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza. But they hold it, Labour, 26 required for a majority, 29 seats the Labour Party have. Independents have 13 and the Conservatives 9. But you can see here that Labour has lost some support. They're down by 4 and the Independents are up by 8, probably because a number of Labour councillors had quit and standing as independents. Let's talk to Councillor Phil Riley. He is the Labour leader of Blackburn with Darwin. Hello to you, Phil. You've held on to the council. Congratulations, but lost some seats. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm afraid it was simply because of disquiet about the Gaza war, if you want to call it that, and disquiet about the response of the Labour leadership, in particular the interview that the national leader made to LBC some months ago. That's been played over and over and over again on social media.
Yes, well, we have Jonathan Reynolds here, part of Keir Starmer's team. What do you say to Phil Riley? They've held on to the council, but there clearly has been an awful lot of unhappiness with what Keir Starmer said in that interview. There was a clarification, but to some extent, I'm paraphrasing, Keir Starmer did say that Israel should be able to do whatever it needs to do to defend itself. And I think the question was broadly including cutting off water or electricity, vital supplies of that area, and he said yes.
Look, I think there's no doubt this has been a factor in these elections. I wouldn't want to come across as not recognising that. I do think it's very important, by the way, not to ascribe one view to a community which is itself have a diverse range of political views, or just to say it's British Muslims concerned about Gaza. I mean, there's wider. That must be acknowledged. Specifically around that LBC interview, we had to clarify what Keir was doing there, which was recognising Israel's right to defend itself, and that has been on a lot of opposition material. I think what I would say is on the local elections, you always have more independents, more Greens, Liberals, more diversity there. So there is the vehicle for that. I would be very confident in winning back the support of people in a general election with the choice between a Conservative government continuing or the change.
Well, Phil, what do you say to that, to those councillors that have quit or the seats that you've lost?
Well, I mean, obviously, the seats we've lost are truly disappointing. We've lost some long-serving councillors, including, unfortunately, my ward colleague who was due to be the mayor of the borough next week.
But do you think Jonathan's right that at the general election, a lot of those people who perhaps voted for independence will come back to the Labour Party?
I have to say it doesn't feel like that today now, but that's not to say that we won't now be resuming our, conversations, our work with the Asian community, because it's something that we're very proud of in Blackburn. We're very keen. We've got a very good reputation for community cohesion and such like. So I mean, I think where I probably agree with Jonathan is that I view this probably as a sort of bump in the road. But I'm glad there's not a general election this afternoon.
Because you think that would be very difficult, do you, for the Labour Party in areas with large Muslim populations?
Yeah, I think if it was this afternoon, I think that the energy that people have put into this campaign over the last few weeks, and it's featured an enormous amount of fairly unpleasant sort of footage on social media and Labour councillors being accused of having blood on their hands and things of that nature. Very difficult to compete with on the basis that in the end we're councillors and we don't do international affairs.
Yes.
But there's been it's been very hard to make that argument in what was just a very, very difficult set of circumstances.
All right, but what do you say to that, Jonathan?
That
is a very, very
It has been difficult. I just wanted to say as well, I'm not suggesting somehow those people who haven't supported Labour just automatically come back. I just think we recognise it's a job to win those people back. I think Phil is spot on in how he has put that challenge in places like Blackburn. I'd also say, we have seen a very good result in Hyndburn. Not far away. In Oldham, next door to me, the results that we've seen... Well,
you lost.
We lost control. That's a disappointing result. But that's the fourth year in a row we've lost seats. And again, that's not just about one community in Oldham. Actually, there are other political factors going on in that.
Phil Riley, thank you very much for joining us today, bringing your sort of thoughts, really, from Blackburn with Darwen in terms of losing seats. But Labour has held the council there. Let me bring you this big news back to Mayoralties, a new one. Very disappointing, particularly for the Prime Minister, because York and North Yorkshire takes in his constituency of Richmond in North Yorkshire. Well, Labour have won it. David Skaith has won it over the Conservative candidate, Keane Duncan. It's true that in the final sort of weeks of this campaign, it did look like it was going to be a much closer run thing. But there were people, certainly in the Conservative Party, who thought you would actually take that, but you haven't. It's over 66,500 votes to David Skaith. Keane Duncan second there with 51, nearly 52,000, and the Liberal Democrat candidate there, Felicity Cunliffe-Lister, on nearly 31,000. So that is a win for Labour. So in terms of the mayoralties so far, Ben Houchin is the only bit of blue, if you like, in these mayoralties. This is Rishi Sunak's backyard. I mean, that is very, very disappointing.
Well, a big chunk of that seat, obviously, is the urban area around York, which is obviously very strong for Labour. So, yes, look, it's a disappointing result. I'm not going to pretend it's not. But again, very mixed picture from those mayoralties as well. But also, interestingly, I was just coming back to the argument Johnny was making there about what you were just talking about, and making the argument that there's work to do for Labour in that particular group of voters, and that's the same as the argument I was making. There's a lot of work to do for us ahead of the general election, and I'm not going to pretend that some of the local results are not disappointing.
Right. Well,
but it's focusing on the important record that we've got, the plans we've got in the future, the things we've achieved in terms of delivering tax cuts for working people, higher pensions for pensioners. It's getting that message out there, landing that ahead of the general election.
Well, landing it certainly doesn't seem to have happened in a lot of these mayoralties, because obviously you haven't won in East Midlands either, another one of the new positions. Andrew, can we just return to the Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza and how much damage that may or may not be doing to the Labour Party? It certainly is inflicting some damage. We can see it in these local elections, although in terms of losing councils, yes, Oldham has gone. Is it a bump in the road? As Phil Riley said, a bump in the road. He's glad it's not happening this afternoon, the general election. It'll all be fine.
Look, I think we ought to recognise as well that in that Blackburn result, it's only a third of the council that was up for election. So actually, if you look at the result for the Independents, they gained 8, took 4 off the Conservatives, so there's no love for them either, and took 4 off Labour as well. So it's a very bad result. I mean, Kate Holland, who's the MP for Blackburn, has opposed the war, voted for a ceasefire, and I think would have a personal vote as well. So it would be different. There are different dynamics in a general election. But clearly, it's a very strong protest. I don't think it's a bump in the road. I don't think, and I know Johnny corrected himself slightly, I don't think this is just a protest and people are going to come back. I think this is something people feel very passionately about. Look, anyone who's watched the footage on our screens of people, basically a trapped civilian population being bombarded by one of the biggest militaries in the world that we're arming and still sending arms to, I think people do feel very passionate and emotional about that, and it's not something you can just trade off with something else. Oh, I like their policy on roads or something.
And that's what you'd like to see the Labour leadership do. You'd like to see them change their policy when it comes to arms.
I think that is what a lot of people would say. It's not just the Labour Party. I think it's Conservatives as well. Look, Conservatives lost 4 councillors in Blackburn. They've lost seats over this as well.
Sure.
And the Conservatives are actually in government. They could do this. And I think Labour do have to be a lot more firm to win back that bit of support, because we're seeing, not just in Oldham, not just in Blackburn, but we're seeing it in Norwich, I'm sure we'll see it in Bristol later as well. And we've seen it even in places like Newcastle as well.
Right, but I mean, Rochdale, we talked to George Galloway earlier, who took Rochdale, difficult circumstances generally because of what happened to the former Labour candidate there, but they've held it. And perhaps that's not a complete surprise, but they've held it very comfortably. I would say the independents there, it's the Working Party of Britain there, have added 2 seats. Labour have lost 1, still comfortably holding Rochdale. But it is a reminder, isn't it, how single issues that mean an awful lot to traditionally Labour voters could do some damage electorally to you. And is there any sense that you would change your position when it comes to maybe arms to Israel or a firmer line in terms of what should happen in the negotiations?
Well, I mean, that is a cracking result in Rochdale, given where we were at the by-election. And again, a reflection that we can't simplify what a complex political contest and complex sets of issues. Labour's position is for an immediate ceasefire, for the acceleration of aid into Gaza and on arms sales compliance with the UK law, which is if there's any risk of UK-made armaments being involved in a breach of humanitarian law, they cannot be exported. I do find, I've got to say, on the because this has come quite rightly with a lot of voters on the doorstep because of how strongly people feel about it. The position that Labour has taken, which recognises, yes, we want an immediate ceasefire, but that requires both sides to comply. A ceasefire is not one side laying down their arms, it's both sides. I think that is very much recognised by the vast majority of Labour and actually swing voters that I've spoken to.
Well, and of course the last sort of line from the negotiations is that Israel has made this very generous offer and that Hamas are being expected to actually agree so that the conflict can stop. I mean, it is a case of negotiations with both sides having to agree.
Of course, both sides have to agree for a ceasefire, but we also don't know the terms of the deal at the moment. They're not in the public domain, and we've got Benjamin Netanyahu saying whatever happens with the ceasefire, we're going to destroy and go into Rafah anyway, which doesn't really bode well And the thing is, there isn't a good faith actor on either side of this conflict.
So what does
and
that
that's
mean
the
then for
problem.
national politics here? I mean,
think
these are local elections. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
if
absolutely.
even the leader, the Labour leader of Blackburn with Darwen, which was held by the Labour Party, thinks it'll be fine, it will settle down, they will work
He
with the
also said,
population.
I hope there's not an I'm
He
glad
did.
there's not an
Well,
election
there isn't,
today.
is there?
No,
So,
there's
I mean,
not.
I suppose the point
Yeah.
is, further down the line when that comes, will it really have an impact?
I think it will in some seats. I hope in Blackburn it doesn't, because Kate Holland has taken a very strong line and I think represented her constituents really well, as good local MPs should. And I hope she's got a strong personal vote. So, you know, again, it's a different dynamic, but it clearly will still be an issue at the general election, I suspect, unfortunately. I don't think this conflict's going to end soon. And I think Labour have to restore faith. It's wider than Gaza, though. We shouldn't just say, you know, the Muslim vote. The Muslim voters are overwhelmingly working class. They're annoyed about other things within the Labour Party. It's deeper set as well than that. There's a feeling that they've not been listened to. If you look at what happened around the Batley and Spen by-election, which Labour held but very narrowly, there was real drifting away, and that was before the Gaza conflict happened.
What do you say to that, Jonathan? I mean, these will be issues that will be important at a general election. And we know that there are certain Labour MPs who are being targeted to some extent. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Leader, Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary in Ilford, that they will come under pressure there. I mean,
well, look, there will be pressure, as there always is. There's going to be a competitive general election. But the story of the results across the UK we're getting is working class voters voting Labour, whatever their background, whatever their ethnicity. I mean, you know, there are places where we really struggled with working class voters, particularly post-Brexit, which have come back hugely strongly to Labour, and that is just the results that we are seeing. So I'm never complacent, but I feel the Labour Party offer that we've got at the minute, the Labour Party as it stands today, is far more competitive with what we might consider the classic red wall areas. And then we're getting this news. I suppose that North Yorkshire result is the blue wall crumbling as well. So look, there's very different politics in different parts of the UK, but I'm really encouraged by what we're seeing in terms of Labour's performance.
well, and just as a reminder, the Labour Party have held Rochdale Council despite losing the parliamentary seat. Are you confident of getting that back from George Galloway at the general election when it comes?
Well, George Galloway's record is often one of spectacular by-election wins and never getting re-elected. So I think we'll be putting, again, a very strong pitch to Rochdale voters to change the Conservative government for a Labour one and the key role they could play in that.
What do you think about the campaign? I don't know how much you knew about the campaign in York and North Yorkshire. It didn't win through. I take what you say about York. It's a young, studenty, quite often Labour-supporting city. But with the Prime Minister symbolically there as an MP, that's his backyard, that's his seat. What does that do, sort of psychologically? You can't take this new mayoralty. You haven't managed it in the East Midlands. You haven't managed it in York and North Yorkshire. Ben Houchin is still there as an incumbent, but these are new positions. What does that say about the Conservative Party hold?
Well, as I said, the mayoralty covers York itself, the city, which is an area that's quite strong for the Labour Party, as well as the more rural areas, and I obviously haven't seen all the detail of the results. Look, all results that you don't win are disappointing.
That was one of the
areas that I hadn't managed to go and visit. I'd done a lot of campaigning in the mayoral areas. I hadn't managed to go and visit that one. So I don't know the details on the ground.
Right, well, as I say, we mentioned Ben Houchin. I think we can see pictures in Teesside here. Supporters there cheering, holding up their Conservative posters and Conservative placards following that win, Jonathan Reynolds. They found quite a few of them by...
It's been locked up in a van outside the count, I think.
Oh, they're admitting it now.
And there is the Prime Minister with Ben Houchin, who is yet again the Mayor of Tees Valley in that victory, which will provide a huge amount of solace. I don't know if we can hear what Ben Houchin is saying, but let's see if he introduces.
Fantastic. I am just so relieved, humbled, proud to get a third term as the Tees Valley Mayor. There's a place where I've born, grown up, lived all my life, have such fantastic friends and family. And again, just really proud to be able to continue with the progress that we've made over the last 7 years, right? The plan is still underway. There's still a lot more to do. There's still a lot more progress that needs to be done. But to get 4 more years to implement that plan, I think is absolutely wonderful. I just hope to be able to make as much progress as we have over the first 7 years. But there's a huge weight of responsibility that comes with that as well. You know, the fact that we've got the backing of people right across the region when people thought that we weren't going to win. You know, we've had the Labour Party camped here for the last 2 weeks. The whole shadow cabinet have basically funded the tourism industry in Teesside for the last 2 weeks. Because they thought they were going to win it, right? They thought they were going to have it, but they were nowhere near in the end. And I just want to say thank you so much to everybody that backed me across this region. This is a vote for you. This is a vote for Teesside, Darlington and Hartlepool, and I absolutely promise to repay you. But at the same time, it's also about this man next to me, because I could not have delivered the things that we've delivered in this region without you, Prime Minister, whether it's the Freeport in Redcar, whether it's bringing the Treasury and the Darlington Economic Campus now to Darlington, creating hundreds and hundreds of jobs, going to be 2,000 in a couple of years, 9,000 jobs created on the Freeport, employment up 5.4% since I was elected in 2017. Teesside wouldn't have had those things if it wasn't for the contribution that you made, Prime Minister. So thank you very much for everything that you've done as well. And here's to 4 more years.
Here's 4 more years. Well, Ben, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's absolutely great to be here with your re-elected Mayor of Teesside. And as Ben said, the Labour Party threw absolutely everything at this election. Keir Starmer came here twice, Rachel Reeves came here 3 times, but even they couldn't dislodge Ben and the fantastic Conservative team, right? And they also threw a lot of mud, it needs to be said, in this election, because they were angry that Ben has delivered more for this region in 7 years than Labour Party managed in 30 years, right? And actually, you know, look where we're standing. You know, when Ben came into the office, this airport was going to be closed down. Right? And now more flights to more places than ever before. The steelworks, desolate, now part of one of the most exciting regeneration projects anywhere in the world. And you and I, we worked together on some great things.
Absolutely.
Made sure that the Treasury is in Darlington, putting this region at the heart of government. The Freeport, as you said, the largest in Europe, attracting thousands of jobs and investment to the area. Now that is levelling up in action. That is what you get with Ben taking bold decisions for this region. That is the Conservatives delivering. And I've got a message for the Labour Party too, because they know that they had to win here in order to win a general election. They know that. They assumed that Tees Valley would just stroll back to them, but it didn't. It didn't. People knew that they couldn't be taken for granted. They knew that it was Ben and the Conservatives that delivered for them, and they stuck with you in this election. And I know that come the general election, they're going to stick with us too, because they don't want to be taken for granted, and they know that it's you and it's the Conservatives that are building a brighter future for Teesside and a brighter future for Britain. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thanks for all your help.
Well, the Prime Minister there with the victorious Ben Houchen wanting to share, of course, in that victory. He's made it to Teesside, a 3rd term there for Ben Houchen. And, of course, because it is the bright spot on what are otherwise pretty dismal results for the Conservative Party. But fighting talk from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, and a message for the Labour Party. Don't expect people here just to stroll back to you, and you really had to win there, the mayoralty, if you want to have any chance of the general election. Do you have a message for Rishi Sunak?
Well, that was like watching, you know, a couple who've been in marriage counselling put on a good show for their kids. I mean, it was like the awkwardness of the exchange between them, Mark. I mean, look, let's be honest. The Prime Minister, when he looked at the list of where he could go this morning, there weren't many options on that list. So, of course, he was going to go there.
Well, sometimes that makes it easier to decide, doesn't it?
It maybe does. Look, and he contradicted himself. He said Labour, sent a lot of our people there. I visited there. And then he said, we took it for granted. Well, of course we didn't. We never actually thought we could
That's not true that you never actually thought. You certainly had lost faith.
We knew it was a harder
one
because the scale of Ben Houchen's majority was very, very significant. Again, on that key test, what does the swing tell us about the parliamentary constituencies? It means we would win all of them if that was repeated. So that's
Before I come back to our other guests, let's talk to Professor Jane Green, who runs the British Election Study. Hello to you, Jane. We've just heard the Prime Minister there with the victorious Ben Houchen in the Tees Valley, and it was fighting talk from him. But more generally, with these results in mind, can the Tories come back in the areas that they have lost? And we haven't talked that much about what we call the blue wall in parts of the south and south of England.
really difficult, isn't it, with local elections results, because it really makes us focus on areas and all of the kind of varieties of results. And it's really difficult then to stand back and see the really big picture. For us, the really big picture in the British election study has been looking over the last 5 years and seeing what happens in the kind of distribution of the vote. So what's basically happened is the Conservatives really did get more support in Leave areas in 2017 and 2019. But support since then has been dropping pretty uniformly across Leave and Remain voters. And so what I think we're seeing in these local elections, if we really take that kind of wider perspective, is Conservative support dropping pretty similarly across those Leave and Remain areas of the country. And so the picture or the story or the explanation for that then isn't really about Leave and Remain. It's about the Conservative Party becoming a less popular party, and they've become a less popular party because of performance failures, right from COVID through to the Truss mini budget and cost of living and everything else. So that brings us back to this kind of your question, Joe, about can they do anything about it?
Yes.
And, we have to understand then, well, why are they in this pickle? Why are they in the situation that they're in? They're in the situation that they're in because voters have lost trust with them. They've lost their kind of competence advantages. They've lost their lead on the economy. They've lost that trustworthiness that they had in 2019. It's not about Leave and Remain anymore. It's not about red wall areas or blue wall areas in the same degree, right? The issue of Brexit has become less salient. What this is about a loss of trust. So if the Conservatives can come back from this, that's what they've got to address. And of course, time's really running out. And we're also seeing increased tactical voting evidence, and John Curtis was talking about this earlier, evidence at the ward level of that. And that also speaks to that issue of just people wanting to vote out the Conservatives. So, it's a really difficult task. People are right on the panel to talk about the campaign and the choice and people tuning in who aren't tuning into local elections, but will tune into the general election and look at that choice. That choice, of course, doesn't necessarily have to be beneficial to the Conservatives. People might look at that choice and they might prefer the Labour Party. So there's loads and loads of work for the Conservative Party to do, and the Labour Party can't rest on their laurels either. Loads of encouragement, obviously, but still some warning signs for Labour.
Right. I mean, interesting on that point, Mark Harper, the Conservative Secretary of State for Transport, saying, yes, of course, there's a lot of work to do, but this idea that not enough people, when you look across the country, are focusing yet on what might be that choice at the general election. And I've been putting it to him and other Conservative MPs that, yes, there isn't that much time. And are people listening? Even if the message is one that they might like, are they listening to Conservative politicians making those arguments? And is there time to change people's minds?
I think the election campaigns in the last two campaigns have been quite influential. It was one of the kind of truisms in academia that campaigns don't really shift the dial. They don't really tend to make a big difference. That wasn't necessarily so true. Certainly in 2017, we saw Labour come back in that particular election and Theresa May lose support. So I guess one has to think about that short campaign period where people say, OK, I need to make up my mind. I'm unhappy with the status quo. I'm not quite sure what this other party, is going to offer me. And then there could indeed be an interesting change that happens in that particular campaign. But it's not in evidence yet. All we've seen in the polls is Conservative losses since the Liz Truss mini budget be pretty static, but then worsening over recent months as Reform UK have started to eat into their vote share further. So, it doesn't look like it's happening yet. These local election results and the by-election results we've had this year have all confirmed the same story, which is, lots of people very fed up with the government. Not a lot of enthusiasm for the Labour Party, but nevertheless, that anti-Conservative vote just being confirmed again and again and again.
Professor Jane
So there's
Green.
a lot needs to change, and perhaps it's the campaign that we need to look to.
Professor Jane Green, thank you very much for giving us your analysis. Mark, you'll want to respond to some of the things that Jane was talking about in terms of the mountain ahead.
Yeah, well, look, I don't think actually she was saying anything enormously different from what I just said, actually, which is campaigns are important. I'm not just talking about the short campaign, but the period between now and the election. There's clearly a lot of work for us to do. She confirmed that a lot of people don't focus on this until you get to the general election, the choice of the election. So I think, look, there's a lot of work for us to do. It's about focusing on our record.
Yes. Well,
but also about what we offer for the future.
Yes. Now, what
people
about
make,
that offer for the future?
Well,
because we know the policies that you've got at the moment, and all right, they may not be listening because they're not that interested, perhaps, in these important local elections. Is there a policy for you that would transform your fortunes?
Well, I don't think politics works like that. I think there isn't you don't say one single thing and suddenly the world changes.
Well, some of your colleagues want to think tax cuts or work.
If politics was that easy, it would be straightforward. No, it's a range of things. Look, we've started cutting taxes for people, the double taxation on work, that's national insurance. We want to continue doing that as we can afford it. We've made a clear commitment on defence spending, not matched by the Labour Party, and we've set out how we're going to pay for that. Well, it isn't matched by the Labour Party. So I think you set out a range of policies. People look at those. People look at those overall. They look at then the choice that they face, and that's how they make their minds up. And they say, big job of work for us to do, but I absolutely think we can do it. And you saw in that clip with the Prime Minister that he's absolutely up for that fight, and I look forward to supporting him in it.
Well, I suppose you'd be a bit surprised if he wasn't. But anyway, let's have a look at some more council results. Let's correct one from earlier and have a look at Norwich. It's actually hung. It's staying in no overall control. We had heard that Labour might have taken it, but in fact, although they have the largest number of seats, it is actually a hung council. 20 required for majority, they're one short. They've got 19. The Greens were on 15. They've gained 2. The Greens in Norwich, they do have quite a strong support and hold there in the city, and Labour have lost 2. And just quickly, before we go to the news, we can have a look at Ada. There, Labour gain from Conservatives, and that is quite a big gain there on the south coast, and they are now on 15 seats, and the Conservatives are on 8. A quick look at the change. Labour have gone up 7. They've taken 7, basically, from the Conservatives, a direct swap. So Labour have gained Ada. Thank you to all of my guests, because some of them are leaving us at this point, but it's time to get a news update with Azadeh Moshiri.
Hello, here is a summary of the BBC News. Results are still coming in from the local council elections in England, but it's clear the Conservatives have suffered heavy losses while Labour have made big gains. And in another blow for the Conservatives, they've also lost the Blackpool South parliamentary by-election. Labour have taken the seat with a huge swing of 26% from the Tories. That's the 3rd biggest swing in post-war by-election history. Here's our political correspondent, Hannah Miller.
The Prime Minister touring Catterick Garrison military base, with very little to laugh about. Trying to defend his party's losses after a dismal set of results.
Obviously, it's disappointing to lose good, hard-working Conservative councillors, but we've still got lots of results to come as well. And there are also things that I would point to. Harlow, for example, where Keir Starmer held a rally just on Wednesday saying that was a place that he had to win, to be on track to win a general election. That hasn't happened.
The Conservatives did deprive Labour of a win in Harlow, but they still lost 5 seats and are considering that a success. The party had also pinned its hopes on Ben Houchen remaining Tees Valley Mayor, though he wasn't even wearing a rosette. And in victory, he warned the Conservatives they need to do better.
They want more progress. We need to give them the excuse to vote for us, and we haven't quite given them that excuse yet.
For Labour, the celebrations are much more widespread, taking the North East mayoralty and securing a seismic win in the Blackpool South by-election.
That wasn't just a little message, that wasn't just a murmur, that was a shout from Blackpool.
A victory symbolic of their successes throughout the night.
We are winning votes across the country, and that, I think, reflects a changed Labour Party with a positive case to take to the country.
The party also managed significant council wins in Rushmore, Hartlepool and Redditch.
Aisha Kuza is duly elected.
But in Oldham, 5 independent candidates standing on a pro-Gaza platform deprived the party of its majority, a trend that may be replicated in areas with a high Muslim population.
The counting is far from over. It will go on into the weekend. But as always, a narrative is emerging. And here in Westminster, the story of these results is bound to impact how MPs are feeling about their prospects ahead of a general election.
The Reform Party recording their best ever by-election result in Blackpool, almost pushing the Conservatives into 3rd place, will do little to calm backbench jitters.
What's rapidly becoming clear is basically
as more people hear us about reform, we're becoming the real opposition to the Labour Party in the North, in the Midlands, in Wales. We're on the way up, and it's quite clear that the Tories are on the way down.
The message from the Liberal Democrats is similar, though we're still waiting for the results from many of their main targets.
A lot of lifelong Conservative voters around the country are looking at this Conservative government and they do not recognise it anymore. They don't speak for them. They're absolutely appalled by the sleaze and scandal that continues to emanate from Westminster.
The Greens may be on course for their best night ever, though again the key results aren't in.
Greens are really now a national force, winning seats in local government in all corners of the country, and people know that if they want change and they want to vote positively for a hard-working Green who's going to represent their community for a fairer society and a greener future, they can get that.
As the results continue to pour in through the afternoon and into the weekend, the parties will all be watching closely to see how they might fare in the general election to come. Hannah Miller, BBC News.
Members of the British Special Forces have told a public inquiry that the SAS committed multiple murders in Afghanistan. The inquiry is examining allegations that the SAS committed scores of executions and murdered innocent civilians, including women and children, during arrest raids in Afghanistan between 2010 and 2013. Donald Trump's criminal trial over hush money payments to an adult film star has resumed in New York. The judge began today's proceedings clarifying that the former president has a right to testify in his trial. Yesterday, Mr. Trump claimed his gagging order prevented him from doing so. In Brazil, floods have killed over 30 people following the collapse of a dam after days of heavy rain. Over 1 million people are now without power and clean water since the storms began over the weekend. The collapse of a hydroelectric dam following days of heavy rains triggered massive flooding. More than 60 people are still believed to be missing. A Chinese spacecraft has taken off this afternoon, aiming to become the first mission to collect rock and soil samples from the so-called dark side of the moon, which is not visible from Earth. It's an uncrewed aircraft, but could pave the way for China's ambitions to put a person on the moon by 2030. The 53-day mission aims to bring around 2 kilograms of lunar samples to Earth for analysis. Now back to elections 2024 with Joe Coburn.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome to this election special. It's been an extremely busy afternoon. Council results from local authorities tumbling in all through the afternoon, and the results of those all-important mayoral contests as well, and police and crime commissioners. Let's just bring you up to date with the state of the parties, because both the Labour and Conservative parties were defending between 950 and 1,000 council seats. Well, you can see there, Labour are on 572. We still have more results to come in, of course, but we're beginning to gauge quite clearly the pattern across the country. They've added 98. Big losses there for the Conservatives. Despite their expectation management, they are still pretty bad results. 203 councillors, they've lost 229, nearly 230. The Lib Dems have added 33 to their tally of 192. They've also held their councils so far. Independents are up too, by quite a lot, 74. They've got 144 councillors, and the Greens have also improved and increased the number of their councillors, up 21. Let's have a look at the number of councils themselves, 107 in total with elections. Just a brief reminder that not all the seats in these councils were actually up for election. In fact, more of them were having what we call thirds, so a bit more difficult to see parties changing hands there. Labour have 30. They have added 5. The Liberal Democrats have defended their 6. They haven't gained any. The Conservatives have lost 4 and are on 4, and the Independents have gained 1. So that's where we are. That's the state of play just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And, of course, we've had big results in the mayoral contest. We have, just before the news, heard that Labour took York and North Yorkshire, which is in Rishi Sunak's backyard. His constituency of Richmond is there in that mayoralty. And Ben Houchen, the Conservative incumbent, has won a 3rd term in the Tees Valley, and we saw Rishi Sunak celebrating with him. And Labour have won the Blackpool South by-election, the parliamentary seat, with a very impressive swing. Let me introduce our guests who have joined us for this part of the programme. For the government, the Work and Pension Secretary of State, Mel Stride, Steve Reid, Shadow Environment Secretary for the Labour Party, and Reform's mayoral candidate in London, Howard Cox. Andrew Fisher and Vicky Young are still with us. First of all, Mel Stride, listening to me talk about those results, it is a very disappointing and dismal night. We have heard from your colleagues that to some extent it was expected. But this far out from a general election could only be 5 or 6 months away. There's just too much to do, isn't there, for you to close the gap with the Labour Party?
Well, look, we've had some difficult results, there's no doubt about that, but you've mentioned Ben Houchen, which is an extraordinary result, and I know Labour desperate to downplay it, but the reality is he's polled over 60% of the vote, and if you went back to 2017, when he was first elected, it was only 40%, so there's been...
But he won on 73% of the vote, didn't he, in 2021?
That is a stratospheric result, and remember that the 2021 results generally were a high water mark. We had the bounce back from the vaccine rollout that we had at the time, all the great work that Rishi did as Chancellor to support the economy.
But what's going to change,
and so on.
What's going to change between now and, let's say, the elections in the autumn?
Well, what I would say is, firstly, we've got to look outwards as a party and communicate the things that we've been doing where we have been successful. We have got inflation down from 11.1% to around 3%. We've seen real wages growing for each of the last 9 months. We've got near record levels of employment, near historically low levels of unemployment.
And yet you're losing across the country. I mean, it must be frustrating.
We are cutting taxes. We've slashed national insurance now by 1/3.
That's because you presided over the highest level of taxation since the war.
But, Joe, to come to your point, OK, what is going to happen now is Labour are going to be put under a much higher level of scrutiny as we approach the general election.
Now,
at the moment,
in my area, support is going to bleed.
I think the polls would be expected to narrow as we approach that election. I know in my area of welfare, I have no idea what Labour stand for on the fundamental reforms that we're bringing forward. We know where they stand for on things like migration, which is whereas we've got the Rwanda deal through. There's early signs that deterrent effect is working. What are Labour saying? They'd scrap it even if it's working. Now, I think those kind of things need to be properly examined, and they will be within a general election campaign.
Andrew Fisher, what do you make of that analysis in terms of more scrutiny, certainly, for the Labour Party? I think you'll find we've put them under quite a lot of scrutiny, Mel Stride, up until now. But even with that scrutiny, and to some extent, you would be one of those who would say the Labour Party hasn't gone far enough, perhaps. They're not radical enough, despite being 20 points ahead. Are they not likely to change that policy, are they, or that sort of strategy before the election?
Well, I don't think they need to. I mean, I think, as we've seen here, as Jane Green said from the British election study, people want the Tories out. That's the mood of the country, and the people will vote Lib Dem to get them out, they'll vote Labour to get them out, they'll vote Green even to get them out in some places. They want them out. And Labour has got a very solid poll lead. That's been borne out. And if you look at the races between Labour and the Tories, Harlow, Thurrock, Redditch, Labour's absolutely trounced the Conservatives in those kind of battleground seats. Rushmore, very surprisingly, to me, as well, you know, ahead of expectation. But Labour can't be complacent. There are areas of the country where the Labour support has gone down. The Tees Valley is a disappointing result for Labour. We shouldn't forget that. But we also should look at it. It's a complex picture. Labour regained Hartlepool and won the council there. And on that swing, they would win Redcar, they'd win Stockton, both Stockton seats as well. So actually it's a very complex picture, but Labour can't afford to be complacent. But the Tories are in a very, very dire state. And the more people look at their record, you may say you've got policies on disability and on migration, but people don't like them. They're not coming out to vote for you for them. You've articulated what you're going to do on that, and people don't like it. They're not voting for it. Look at where you are on the polls. There was a poll last week that you're on 18%.
If you look at the results across the country, they're based on, as you'd expect, low turnouts.
Well, but local elections...
And if you look at it, the one national, the parliamentary seat, 33%, I think, was the turnout. Now, I strongly suspect there are a lot of Conservatives who stayed at home and sat on their hands, who are grumpy with the government. I'd be surprised if they weren't, on the back of the high inflation that we had imported from the Ukraine-Russia war, on the back of all the work that we had to do and financial support post-COVID, which has resulted in some increase in taxes. We're now bringing taxes strongly down.
Yeah.
But that is not something that's going to persist forever. I think we can motivate those people to come back to us, and I think we will do it both on our record, exposing Labour to proper scrutiny as the general election.
All right, well, putting the Ben Houchen...
It's a very volatile election, Joe. Very volatile.
Well, that may be true. Or let's pick up on some of those.
What would you say in 2017
This is not well. This is not well.
You said she was going to win.
Yeah, and she
in a
lost
matter of weeks, it disappeared. So those things happen. Yeah.
I mean, that might be just a warning to the Labour Party not to run a poor campaign when the general election actually comes. But Steve, these are local elections. It isn't yet the general election. Is there enough evidence? I mean, there's quite a lot of evidence, clearly, that Labour has done very well. But in terms of that real enthusiasm for Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, if you look at the result, I mean, I can't help thinking the Conservatives seem to be in denial about the scale of what's happening, what's happened yesterday. We've seen voters switching directly from the Conservatives to Labour, particularly in those seats where Labour needs to win key battleground seats to form a majority after the next general election. That is where Labour is performing the best. Blackpool was the only vote yesterday where Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer were on the ballot paper, and Labour absolutely stormed that. The Conservatives were struggling to hold on to second place. Labour has stormed that, one of the most spectacular swings ever in by-election history. It's remarkable. You go across to Yorkshire, the Prime Minister's own constituency now has a Labour mayor for York and Yorkshire. Head south to Rushmore, which includes Aldershot, the home of the British Army, never had a Labour council, let alone a Labour MP, swang directly from Conservative to Labour yesterday. Labour is reaping the reward from Keir Starmer changing our party, and a country that is crying out for change is now getting behind that vision.
Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak weren't, of course, on the ballot paper in Blackpool South. Chris Webb obviously won it for the Labour Party, and the resignation of Scott Benton, who was the Conservative MP, was as a result of a lobbying scandal. So, I mean, there were complications, and to be honest, if you hadn't won Blackpool South, I take from you entirely that the swing was impressive by historic standards. But even so, if you hadn't won it, that would have been
well, historic, Joe, but also part of a pattern. If you look at Mid-Bedfordshire, if you look at Selby and Ainsty, and now this one, we're routinely getting swings of over 20% because people want the Tories out, but they're positively switching to support Keir Starmer's Labour because they see how different it is from 2019
let's just show you,
when
I'm going to say goodbye to you, Andrew Fisher. Thank you very much for joining us on the election special programme. We can just look at the swing here in Blackpool South that Labour have gained from the Conservatives. Yes, it's a whopping 26%. They have been doing well. Steve Reed is absolutely right. The Labour Party in recent by-elections there, and that is right up there with their highest results. Let's go to another part of the country where Labour need to be doing well in order to win some of the parliamentary seats, and that is to our colleague Joshua Nevitt, who's a reporter in Nuneaton. Hello to you, Joshua. Labour have been gaining seats there, up 7 so far, I hear.
That's right. Well, it's actually on a knife edge at the moment. Labour have been gaining seats. They went to an all-time low of 5 councillors after the last set of elections in 2022. But it's actually neck and neck at the moment with 11 councillors all. So it's really on a knife edge here with over half of the results declared. And Labour did have really high hopes of winning back this council. For decades, Labour had been in control since its creation, since 1974. Labour had been in control for 40 years across its entire lifespan. So there was high hopes, given the national mood, given what we've seen in terms of local issues here, there was hopes that Labour will be able to win it back. But it seems that there's a bit of a tight race at the moment in some of those key marginal wards.
Well, that is interesting. Joshua, stay with us for a moment, because I'm just going to show our viewers and our guests here the West Midlands, because we've talked an awful lot about what we call the former Red Wall Labour heartlands in areas like the North East. But the West Midlands is one of those parts of the country where Labour need to have a strong showing. We can see councillors here. The number for Labour, they're on 51, up 23. Looks like an almost direct swap here with Conservative councillors who are on 32, down 23. Now, we are going to get the result of the West Midlands mayoralty, but sadly not this afternoon. We probably won't hear it till tomorrow. And that will be a critical result because a little bit like in the North East, the Labour Party is advancing well in terms of Hartlepool, but it didn't get the mayoralty. Let's see what happens when it comes to the West Midlands. Joshua, if you're still there, I don't know if you are, I don't know when you think we will get those final results from where you are.
I think we're expecting the results fairly shortly. As I speak, I'm hearing a key result being announced. So the deputy leader of the Tory party here, Claire Golby, her seat was really close. The initial result was actually that she'd lost her seat by 6 votes, and there was actually a recount ongoing. That's currently being announced as we speak. So Labour seems to be the more happy of the two camps there.
Yes. Yes, lots of celebrations there by what looked like Labour supporters hugging each other. So does that change what's happening in Nuneaton, Joshua?
I think we'll have to wait and see to take stock of that result. But it was definitely a close one in Arbury. As I said, there was a recount there. So we'll have to kind of see what the final result was. But I think looking at the bigger picture here, as we go towards the final result, I think Labour would be hoping to take back control of this council. I mean, will be a prize going into the next general election for Keir Starmer. I mean, Nuneaton has been seen historically as a bellwether seat.
Yes.
Historically, it's voted with whoever the winning party is in the general election.
All right.
And I think Marcus Jones was a bit nervous today when I spoke to him earlier about what may come in the future.
All right, Joshua Nevitt there in Nuneaton, and it looks like a pretty tight race in terms of the council. We'll come back to you when the final result is announced. Let's catch up with Nick Eardley. He is at the screen to give us an overview of some of the key results so far. Nick.
Hi, Joe. I want to talk a bit about reform, actually, and the challenge they're posing to the Conservative Party in these results. Let's just start with the big picture. This is the vote share and what's happened. Reform are up a wee bit, up 2%. They've won 0 councillors so far, though, so they're not making a significant impact in that sense, that they're starting to have their own elected representatives. However, I want to show you this. This is the change since 2021 in the Reform Party's standing. As you can see, oh no, hold on, that's the overall picture. Let me show you Blackpool South, and in a second I'm going to try and show you how the Reform vote has changed, particularly in those areas where Conservatives are. So this is the Blackpool South by-election, where things were obviously very tight between the Conservatives and Reform. Reform almost pipped the Conservatives into second place. But when we go back to the big picture in the local elections, have a look at this. This is all the areas where the Reform Party are standing. The results we have so far, with 106 out of 127 key wards declared. The Conservative vote in areas where the Reform Party has stood a candidate is down 19%. So they're taking a bit of a kicking in those areas where Reform have put up a candidate. And as you can see, Reform's vote is up 12%. Now, obviously, these are local elections. This is not going to be something that's completely replicated necessarily at a general election. But the thing that will worry some Tory MPs, particularly in places like Blackpool South, particularly in the north of England, particularly in those areas where immigration is seen as a key issue, is if Reform are throwing the kitchen sink at those seats, could a similar thing happen? Could Reform get a decent chunk of the vote in those areas where they're standing? And could the main ones who lose out as a result be the Conservatives? There could be some seats where that's really crucial.
Thirdly, thank you very much. Let me introduce Tim Montgomery, who has enjoyed us. He has joined us.
I'm enjoying the programme as
good.
well.
Thank God for that. Yeah, you're right. You'll enjoy it even more after half an hour. But welcome to you from Conservative Home and, of course, Conservative Party watcher. But let me get Howard Cox to respond as Reform's mayoral candidate. Without being too cynical, Howard Cox, just listening to Nick Eardley there, broadly speaking, what we just saw from Nick is broadly in line with how you are polling nationally, which is pretty significant. But you've also stood candidates only in the areas where you thought you could do well, much of it at the expense, perhaps, of the Conservatives. Beyond that, there isn't anything particularly surprising, is there, from what we've seen so far?
I think you're right. The assessment is pretty correct. But the point is, we're a small party. We haven't got anywhere near the resources that Labour and the Tories have. And we mustn't. I mean, I'm listening to Mel Stride, who I've got incredible respect for over the years. He's been very supportive of the Fair Fuel UK campaign I run, the petrol and diesel, the fuel duty. But the simple fact is, I voted Tory for 50 years. I'm 70 this year, and the Tories have left me. And that's what I'm getting right across the country. They're no longer the Tory party. And Reform UK, when I take off the rosette and just talk about the policies that Reform have, they are loved.
Tim, what do you say, listening to Howard Cox? Do you think the Tories should change their strategy? Mel Stride should be talking about different things.
Well, I'm a tribal Tory, so I'm going to vote Tory regardless. But when I hear candidates from the Reform Party, they're talking more my sort of language and more my sort of vibe than the Conservative Party. And that's the point. I think the Conservative Party's problem is that they're beginning to do the right things now. Taxes are beginning to be cut. They're beginning to get tough on immigration.
From a very, very high.
But that's the problem. For so long, the Conservative Party has been going in the wrong direction. It's been doing the things that it said it wouldn't and not doing, the things that it said it would. And the last-minute course correction, while it's welcome, I don't think really will fundamentally affect voters. And even perhaps the thing that the Tory party is holding on to overnight, which is the Ben Houchen victory, if those results were replicated at a general election, the Conservatives would have lost all the general election seats in that area. So I'm afraid when the Conservatives are really tested in terms of parliamentary stuff, like in the Blackpool South by-election, the party's falling short. And I fear the Conservative MPs have got to ask themselves some very tough questions as to whether 18 months into Rishi Sunak's leadership, he's actually delivering the kind of progress you'd expect. Because we're not in a midterm. This is at the end of a parliament, and things aren't getting better. If anything, they're getting worse.
Mel?
So I think what Nick's analysis shows is that where Reform do reasonably well, they will not get across the line, so we haven't seen any seats gained, and in the first past the post-parliamentary election, it's very unlikely, as Howard was saying. But hold on, this is important, Joe. So the consequence, however, as we've seen, is that it eats into the Conservative support. So that leads me to conclude that a vote for Reform is effectively a vote for Keir Starmer.
But you don't have a divine right to rule.
You're
this is a democracy.
Right. You are absolutely right.
The Greens are doing well. Well done, the Greens.
That's the way the numbers work as it happens. So, but that is not the same thing as to say that we don't need to absolutely address the issues that are important to those voters. And I think, as Tim has suggested, we are very much focused on those, getting inflation down. People want taxation down. We've reduced national insurance by 1/3. We have reduced national insurance by 1/3. It's worth £900 a year.
But now, what do you say to voters?
Worker.
I tell you that, but what do you say? What do you say to voters? What do you say to Tim, who are really saying it's just too late? Let's say they are the right policies, but I mean, Tim called it a course correction. We know, for a variety of reasons, that the tax burden has gone up. That's a choice by the Conservative government. Tax burden has gone up to its highest level. You have cut national insurance twice. Yes, but those frozen tax thresholds have meant that people are paying much higher levels on tax.
Actually, an average worker isn't. They're paying the lowest marginal tax since the 1970s.
But they have been. And we're talking about very recent changes. Then you look at immigration. Promises to bring it down one way or another. Let's just talk about legal migration. Record highs of 745,000. The point is, you have been saying one thing and doing another.
So
what's going to change in people's minds in terms of trusting you?
So I think we are doing a number of things. On tax, part of the reason why the tax burden rose, and it is now distinctly coming in a downward direction because it's in the DNA of the Conservative Party to believe in low taxes, is because of the £400 billion worth of support that we provided to the economy. Right, when Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor and was incredibly popular, he saved us mass unemployment and got us through that very difficult stage.
So was he so unpopular as
what
Prime
I would
Minister?
say is kind of to evoke Harold Wilson for a moment. I think it's even more important today, what he said in his time in the 60s, that a week is a long time in politics. We have a highly volatile electorate. We have weeks and months to go before the next general election. We, as Tim, I think, is suggesting, are definitely pushing and pursuing the right policies that people want, and we've got to now focus outward, get those messages over, and get a great manifesto
but the reality,
and hold the
reality
Labour Party
the reality is the
account.
reason that the Conservatives have given us the highest rates of personal taxation since the Second World War is because they are incapable of growing the economy. And a low-growth economy has led into a high-tax economy that has also led to public services collapsing. So it's almost every area you look at, this Conservative government has failed. And what we saw yesterday was not just voters recoiling away from that Conservative failure, there was Conservative voting switching directly from the Tories to the Labour Party because Keir Starmer has changed the Labour Party, and voters see that as the way that they can change the country.
What about Harlow? So Harlow, we had the leader of the Labour Party going down to Harlow on the eve of the election on the Wednesday with Angela Rayner, a big rally. Amongst the various things he said was we've got to win places like Harlow if we are going to get into number 10. Yep. What was the result in Harlow,
Mel, you can pick
the
old fig leaf to cover up your embarrassment, but these are some of the best results for local elections the Labour Party has had in a generation.
I'm just referring to what Keir Starmer said, and I'm holding him to his own test, not to my test.
It's interesting that you said that voters on the doorstep in parts of the country are saying we're going to switch, or we have switched our votes to the Labour Party because Sir Keir Starmer has changed the Labour Party. And yes, he has changed the Labour Party. But what are you going to do so radically different to what the Conservatives are now doing? You've signed up to pretty well... let's put the illegal immigration Rwanda scheme to one side. But in terms of, broadly speaking, tax and spend, they're not going to experience anything radically different.
The key to this is to grow the economy.
Yes.
So Labour is going to set up GB Energy, a publicly owned company that will direct private and public money to invest in wind, wave, solar and nuclear power so we can take back control of our energy in this country, clean, green energy that creates new jobs and cuts bills for businesses and households. More jobs, cheaper bills, help with the cost of living, jobs for your kids in the future. That is a really positive offer from Labour. And people came out yesterday, not just because they're sick and tired of Conservative failure, but they want the change Labour is now offering. They see this party, the Labour Party, completely different to the one that lost 4 years ago. They're rejecting the Conservatives, but they're switching. North Yorkshire, the Prime Minister's own seat, now has a Labour mayor. That's not an area that Labour's ever done well in before at all.
You mentioned,
but it now has a Labour mayor.
You mentioned green and environmental things and net zero. It wasn't long ago that your party and Rachel Reeves came out with a £28 billion unfunded commitment, which was totally reckless, had to row back on it in terms of saying, oh, we won't be spending that money after all.
Well, circumstances changed, if you remember. Liz Truss crashed the economy,
the policy, as I understand it, still remains. So it's
interest rates soaring, so the cost of borrowing went up, so the level of borrowing has to come down. But it was your party that crashed the economy and sent my constituents' mortgages skyrocketing. They're paying a £400 premium, hard-pressed families, because your government crashed the economy.
Beginning to come down, and the reason why that's happening is we are seeing mortgage rates, for example, softening, and we are expecting
You tell that to someone coming out of a fixed mortgage deal.
But the reason for that is we have brought inflation down. Now, that was something that happened because of the war in Ukraine and energy prices and so on.
No, it's because Liz Truss crashed the economy.
In the tough choices of government,
the rate of increase in prices
is
beginning to slow. But in terms of the pain that people have felt in terms of rising prices is pretty well embedded. I mean, Tim, you said something earlier, which is that Conservative MPs in areas where the councils have gone, in key areas across the country, whether it's in Thurrock, whether it is in Rushmore or Hartlepool, and you said they're going to have to ask themselves some big, big questions. Is one of those questions about Rishi Sunak staying on as leader until the general election?
I'm afraid it is. I think Rishi is a very decent man, a very good man, but I just don't think he's very good at politics. What we haven't been able to do, for example, is define Labour. 18 months into Rishi Sunak's leadership, we don't really know what the cost of Labour is. Whereas if the election is a referendum on the Tories absolutely lose. Somehow we have to turn it into a choice. We have to know actually what Rishi Sunak would do with a majority. I bet if we asked all of us around this table to write down what he wanted to do, we wouldn't know. Does he want to build houses? Does he want to invest in vocational education? He's had a parliamentary majority of 60, 70, and it's been wasted. There have been no big reforms. And I think, go on like this, the Tory MPs this weekend need to say to themselves, is this going to change if we keep the Prime Minister in place? Is he suddenly going to become good at politics? And of course he isn't.
Right.
And if they stick with him, I'm afraid the same results are going to keep happening.
Right, there's no sense, though, is there, of momentum?
No, there isn't. I'm probably a minority, but I think it's necessary for them to at least ask these questions.
Right, I mean, asking the questions, do you accept that the idea of a challenge to Rishi Sunak's leadership, which would look absurd, arguably, to the electorate. I mean, even Andrea Jenkins, Conservative MP, who's one of those who's publicly put in a letter of no confidence some time ago. Simon Clarke is another from, actually, the Tees Valley area. But they're the only two we know about publicly. But even Andrea Jenkins, to me, it felt like she was saying it's too late to change the leader. I think she said something like, we've got to work with what we've got. Do you not accept that that is really the only option?
I think this is the last chance. If the Tory party doesn't move in the next few days, and I agree, Joe, I think it's unlikely that they will, then Rishi Sunak is safe for the general election. And I expect the people who will be most glad at that is the Labour Party, because they recognise, I think, in Rishi Sunak, someone who hasn't cut through to voters. By now, 18 months into his leadership, there should be some sign that things are getting better politically, but they're not. The swing, for example, in Blackpool South was as bad as almost any of the by-elections we've had in this Parliament. And so if the Tory party go into the general election with Rishi Sunak as leader, they can expect the kind of pounding that we've seen local councillors receive overnight.
I think there's going to be a message of unity, actually, is what's going to happen over the weekend. I think there's a lot of Conservative MPs who do think it is now too late. That, I mean, I did put it to somebody and said, you know, it would be a very difficult thing for you to do, and they said, yeah, it would make us look ridiculous. Now, that doesn't rule out it happening, obviously, because it has been done before. But I think a lot of them are now saying, look, especially the message to those MPs who came in 2019, there's quite a lot of anger from some of, I would say, the MPs that have been there for longer, saying, if you go around trashing your brand and trashing your party publicly, how can you expect voters to swing behind the party? So I do wonder now whether, because there are only a few months to go, whether most Tory MPs will now say, look, we go into this fight and it's damage limitation.
Well, on the back of what Vicky has just been saying, let's just have a look at Solihull. Conservatives have held it. Well, they've certainly won enough seats to hold on to it. It had looked as if it was a little bit shaky in terms of the Conservatives holding it, and in an important area in the country, in the West Midlands. Mel, do you want to respond to what you've heard?
Yeah, well, I think the Prime Minister's position is secure.
You think it's safe? He'll lead you into the
There is
election.
no massive groundswell amongst my colleagues for any of that, and I think I would know if there was. And we are right to absolutely unite. But where Tim is absolutely right is taking the fight to Labour. And part of that is, what does Labour actually stand for? They have this Ming Vase strategy, it's refers to, which is that they've got this lead they're going to protect, they're going to tiptoe across this slippery floor, not say anything, try and keep a low profile.
But it's working.
The thing that will change, to Tim's point, is a general election is a different terrain to the elections that we're having now. Labour will be held to scrutiny. We will expect answers from Labour. In my area, where I have no idea what they believe in, we will start to understand.
Steve, we can just show you that Milton Keynes Labour have gained it. A very important council, Milton Keynes, in Buckinghamshire. It was hung. You've gained it. Yeah. Another indication of Labour building back in those areas, although not.
But we are seeing this trend up and down the country in all parts of the country. But I keep hearing Mel.
About the general election,
I keep hearing Mel telling me how well the Conservatives are doing.
Well, I haven't said that.
If you're so confident,
I think
why don't we get the Prime Minister on his lectern outside 10 Downing Street this afternoon and call that general election? Because what these results say to me is this is a country desperate for change, desperate now. You're pointing to places where you may have done a little bit better than elsewhere. Well, let's give the British public a chance
areas
to choose
that
the
your
next
leader
Prime Minister,
said you had
not
to
you
win
and your colleagues in Parliament. We've had 5 Conservative Prime Ministers in 8 years so far. The public want a new Prime Minister, but not another Tory.
But can I quickly go to Howard's point? The points that we need to be addressing that Reform are
which
concerned
ones?
about. Migration, right? And this illustrates the point to Tim's point. illegal immigration. At the moment, there is not enough discussion of the fact that, firstly, the Rwanda policy is beginning to show a deterrent
We
effect.
have
but
talked
secondly,
so much about
but
Rwanda.
Labour's
That you
position on
cannot
it, Joe,
say.
but Labour's position on it,
No, we've talked
which is
about
that we
that
have
too.
about 90 to 100,000 people here illegally, that Labour are saying, oh, well, we will now assess them exactly, tantamount to some kind of amnesty for tens of thousands of illegal migrants. Now, I
think the judgment has been judging the government on their own terms.
And that will
in terms
be
of what
a
they said about
message
Rwanda.
that
I'm
we
going
will
to say thank you
debate
to
in the general
Tim
election.
Montgomery.
And I have enjoyed being with you.
joining-
Back to that introduction.
I just had that line a little too early in your appearance here on the show. Let's talk to my colleague in Weymouth. Jenny Kumar is there because I think we are waiting for a result, hopefully coming in quite soon from Dorset.
Oh, yes, we're in Weymouth. The count for the Dorset Council has just begun. You can see on the tables behind me the first 6 wards are being counted, and turnout, I'm told, is around 35%. In one ward, the Chesil Bank ward, it was 49%. And I've been speaking to the Lib Dem leaders and the Conservative group leaders here, and this is really a fight in a true blue area between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. The Lib Dem group leader has told me that he's fairly confident that they will become the largest group. He's not quite sure of the size of how big their win will be, whether he may have to work with other parties. Other parties such as the Greens and Independents have said throughout the campaign that they would work collaboratively with other parties if the opportunity arose. Now, the Conservatives have been a bit more muted here. They say it's too early to tell what the situation will be. I've been speaking to Simon Hall, the MP for North Dorset, to get his sense of what was going on, and he told me that he feels that the party is under pressure here, but not totally swamped. So we should find out. The counting's just started now, actually. We're expecting overall results at around 7 o'clock. We should have a clearer idea of where things are heading in the next few hours. But the campaign here has been really interesting because the Lib Dems have really thrown a lot at this. Their leader, Sir Ed Davey, has been here in the patch virtually every week visiting and campaigning, and they've basically for the past 2 years been focusing on winning here and, door knocking, leafleting. They've had a lot of resource placed on that on the ground here, and they're hoping that they can replicate here some of the wins they've seen in by-elections and council elections in nearby areas. And one of the seats here, the parliamentary seats, the West Dorset seat held by Chris Loder, is one of their key seats that they're hoping to gain in the general election. The Conservatives here, their campaign has been quite different in the sense that they very much focused on local issues and called themselves the local Conservatives and almost distanced themselves from the National Party. The leader said quite early on in the campaign, when he was asked by the National Party, by MPs, how they could help, he said, stay away. We're focusing on a local campaign. They've been on the doorstep giving a message that they've done well with financial management, effective service delivery, and they're hoping that can cut through. But the Lib Dems are really hoping that they'll be able to overturn what was a slim Conservative majority here. The Conservatives have had a stronghold here in this area, both in parliamentary and local elections for decades. But the Lib Dems are hoping they can win here, and that will bode well for the general election.
Well, absolutely, on the basis of Ed Davey's repeated visits, the Liberal Democrat leader. Jenny Kumar there in Weymouth, thank you very much. But result from there not coming in until 7 o'clock. Let's have a chat about the Liberal Democrats, Vicky, because we've got this result too from Brentwood in Essex. It was a hung, the council, and it remains so. The Conservatives will be pleased that they haven't lost it. They're on 19 seats. You can see 20 would have been required for a majority. That means it is in no overall control again. The Liberal Democrats have gained a seat and it's put them up to 17, and the Conservatives have lost, but they would have loved to have clearly won that council. And let's show you Basildon. The Conservatives have lost that to no overall control. So they've lost it with Labour gaining and a lot of support being lost there to the Conservatives. Labour on 18, the Tories on 13. Again, pretty true blue area, traditionally Conservative. Independents on 11. If we show you the seat change, yes, that's a big drop for Conservatives, down 12. Up 6 for Labour and the Independents. In fact, just before I come to the Liberal Democrats, Vicky, let's just pick up on this result. 12, lost 12 seats in Basildon. I mean, that will be very disappointing in that part of the world in Essex.
Well, Joe, as I've accepted as soon as I came onto your panel, you know, this is a tough set of results for us, there's no doubt about it. But equally, there are things such as Tees Valley, where Labour, right in the heartland, just to get this into perspective, right in the Red Wall heartland, all 5 of those boroughs, Ben Houchin won. There are places like Harlow that the leader of the opposition went down to and said, we've got to win Harlow, you know, if we're going to get the keys to number 10.
But look at Basildon.
And it hasn't happened. But of course, I totally accept this has been difficult. My heart goes out to those very hard-working local councillors who have done wonderful work, and we know that locally Conservative councils deliver better services at a lower cost.
We just heard in Dorset the Conservatives have run a very local campaign away from the national campaign.
Well, to get back to Ben Houchin, I really do not accept
this. We've barely left him alone all afternoon.
Well, since I know what was gone on beforehand, but certainly just to make the point here, you know, he ran as a Conservative. We've been up there campaigning with Conservative branded literature.
Well, he didn't.
He won. No, hold on a second.
The first time I saw the word Conservative behind him was after he'd won. He ran as an independent. He didn't mention Rishi Sunak the entire campaign.
When people went into the polling booth and their pen went down and put an X against his name, it would have had the Conservative Party logo prominently against it and the word Conservative.
I have to tell you, in interviews, Ben Houchin himself has said that there were a lot of people who voted for him. That helped him win with his personal appeal, but they're not going to vote Conservative at the general election.
Now, things can't change, but let's always. You know, when we win, we're told, well, that's something else that's going on, and when we lose,
the scale of the swing there means that Labour would win. The scale of the swing there, Mel, means that Labour would win every single constituency in the mayor's area. Every single constituency.
You're taking too much for granted.
I'm looking at the votes that people
let him speak, because the viewers can't
yesterday. I'm looking at votes. This isn't a poll. This isn't my supposition. People came out of their homes and they voted in the way that they voted. And the result of that would be Labour winning every one of the constituencies in the area where Ben Houchin is currently mayor. And Ben also, he ran without mentioning the word Conservative or Rishi Sunak in any of his material or speeches.
Right.
That's
that's not true. I think Mark Harper came on and showed you some literature with Conservative branding. That is simply not true.
He did, but we were told, and certainly reporting that over the campaign, he did not play up, let's put that, in terms of Conservative National Party and Rishi Sunak. I did say I was going to come to Vicky with the Liberal Democrats, and I will. But first of all, because we haven't heard from Howard Cox for quite a long time, just to talk briefly.
Still here.
I know. Well, good. About the London mayoral election. Now, the assumption is it's Sadiq Khan's to hold on to. What's your thought?
I would have thought that he's going to win this. Susan Hall, I think, has done a reasonably
That's
good...
the Conservative candidate.
Conservative, yes, and there's me. I entered this knowing that I wouldn't win, but we're putting our in our journey to the general election. The reform is coming across the country because we had just had our best by-election result, only 100 votes behind the Tories. Yeah. Well, that's the sort of thing that's happening, and we're polling more than nationally now in the polls now based on these results. And as far as London is concerned, I am hoping that we'll get 3 or 4 candidates on the Assembly for reform, and then we can hold the, I assume, Sadiq Khan to account, because for 8 years in opposition, the Tories have allowed him to get away with ruining our capital.
Oh, he's ruined the capital, Steve.
Well, absolutely not. I mean, it's quite a big ask to go for your 3rd term as Mayor of London. Ken Livingstone didn't pull it off. That was when he lost to Boris Johnson.
Are you concerned that Sadiq Khan might lose? I mean, there's speculation, and there's absolutely no more than that this is going to be actually a lot closer.
Well, the votes
are
cast, and we'll see, won't we, when they get counted. But I was on the doorsteps in my constituency, which is in London, yesterday, and there seemed to be plenty of support for Sadiq. I think myself it'll be closer than some of the polls have made it
It's
look.
a new system, of course. They're doing it by
the
first past
messages
the
that were
post.
coming back on the doorstep were people liked the free school lunches proposal that he's introduced.
But what about
People
issues of
like
knife crime, Steve?
Well, I was with
Hang on, one at a time, and I'll come to you.
I was with Sadiq in Croydon just a few days ago when he announced an increase and an extension in the My Ends programme, which invests money into community projects to support young people at risk of getting involved in violent crime.
This is after years of him being London Mayor and knife crime
it's already up
going
and running. He set it up and it's going to be expanded. Now, I know from my experience, Joe, as a former council leader, we cut violent crime when I was leader of Lambeth Council by
when was
a third
that?
in 18 months.
When was that?
In the late noughties. But by doing exactly the kind of things that Sadiq is doing now, involve communities, intervene early and knock those young people off the crime escalator before their criminal behaviour gets too serious. That is a positive proposal from Sadiq Khan, and I hope he will be elected to carry it out.
Right. I mean, Howard, what do you say in response to those issues? Because the Conservatives have said and will say that voting for reform is a vote for the Labour Party.
I hear it time and time again. We hear it from nationally, don't we? Voting reform is going to put Starmer in. You said it earlier on, didn't you, Mel?
Yeah.
The simple fact is this, is that we have a mayor in London who's been dishonest. He's... I'm sorry.
Well, hang on. Just let's be careful about any allegations of...
Well, I'm happy for him to bring on the lawyers.
Well, no, because it will be me that will face it, never mind you. So any allegations that have not been investigated or we don't know about, let's just keep it broadly in terms of that claim.
OK,
the votes for reform...
I respect what you're saying then,
Thank
Joe.
you.
OK, point taken. But there are certain policies been put in place based on very data that is not proven. There, I'm going to say it along those lines, including healthcare or fatality data, that sort of thing. And also, like there's a public consultation agreement to extend the ULEZ to the M25. 2 out of 3 didn't want it. He ignored it. Those are the sorts of things. I can go on forever.
That, of course, did cost you at the Uxbridge by-election, didn't it,
And
Steve
it will
Reed?
cost votes. That's right. And the issue there was, unlike Bristol, Bradford, other cities that had a scheme like this, the government offered them funding for a scrappage scheme. They didn't offer London a penny. And I can't help thinking that was to try and undermine the Mayor of London.
But it's purely...
Can I come in? So let's be really clear about this.
All right.
Sadiq Khan has been a disaster as Mayor of London. Now, look...
You need to have some evidence for it.
Yeah, knife crime is one thing that you mentioned that has gone up. The ULEV war on the motorists that has particularly affected the outer London boroughs. It'll be interesting to see the way that they vote. The pay-per-mile scheme that he's been talking about will be another assault on motorists and so on. The kind of additional mayoral
just on this joke.
Cost.
Let Mel finish. And then
the additional costs that he's loaded onto Londoners through the mayoral surcharge, etc. And if you put all those things together and you don't want Sadiq Khan, which a lot of people don't, to Howard's point, the problem is when you have reform in the mix, that what is happening is a number of people, it's true, a number of people who would otherwise vote Conservative to head off Sadiq Khan actually end up seeing Sadiq Khan elected. So it is this point that a vote for reform is a vote for Labour. That is the critical point.
Can I just say something very important to Mel's point there?
Sure.
I've approached Susan Hall and I said, can we work together? Even senior cabinet ministers have asked her to work with me and she's not responded. We could have actually been working together, to get rid of Sadiq Khan.
But you would still have presumably stood in the election, and that's the point.
Well, you might have seen the independent article.
But would you not have stood if Susan had agreed to some policies when it comes to...
It is hypothetical. We haven't had that discussion.
Well, it's too late now, anyway.
I want to get rid of Sadiq Khan, and I really want to do that. Right. And I may have been persuaded.
OK, Howard Cox, thank you very much for joining us, the Reform candidate for the London Mayoralty, which we won't know the result of, but it's interesting to discuss it. Let's just pick up briefly on the London Mayoralty. The result will be tomorrow. You're talking about the polls closing, it's first past the post with Sadiq Khan.
I think last time round that it was very much that the Labour lead was overestimated actually in the polls, and it ended up being a little bit closer. But there's just some whisperings which are no more than that, and I think some of it is based on, as you were talking about there, the impact of the vote, the ULEZ, on the outer London boroughs, and quite a lot of anger there about it, and whether that has switch people's votes, which may not otherwise have gone to the Conservatives, but actually may have done. But it's obviously mass speculation because no one knows at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it is traditionally the case that the inner London boroughs tend to be Labour voting, the outer ones more Conservative. I mean, obviously, Boris Johnson was Conservative mayor for 2 terms, and before that it was Ken Livingstone as an independent. It does look at the moment as if it will still be Sadiq Khan, but maybe it will be a closer-run thing.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a
Labour
spectacular
really
win
would
for
be.
the Conservatives if they were to take the city. I mean, the big thing about Boris Johnson was always that he was able to win as a Conservative in a very traditionally Labour place. But there is this quite big distinction between the outer parts of London and inside. But there, the Liberal Democrats would say that they are pretty strong in some of those boroughs.
Well, they are in the southwest of London.
Yeah.
Well, on the Liberal Democrats, because, well, it feels like about half an hour ago, we were mentioning that the Liberal Democrats... Well, Dorset, first of all, and also that the Liberal Democrats have failed to take Brentwood in Essex, which they were optimistic about. That would have been a big win for them, Vicky?
Yeah, it would have been. I think they saw that very much of that would have been a very, very good day. I think they would be hoping to do better in Dorset, traditionally in the southwest. But I think what's happening there is that, we talk about the blue wall, the red wall. There are not as many direct competitions between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives this time round. But obviously, nightmare scenario for the Conservatives come a general election is that the Lib Dems, because they are targeting, quite a small number of seats, actually. But that's what they're going to do. That is their strategy. They build support and then they target those parliamentary seats. The danger for the Conservatives is that they end up, having Labour fighting them and then winning in lots of those areas, and then the Lib Dems taking from those areas.
And what about in the southwest? I mean, the southwest of England, very much in your neck of the woods, Mel Stride, because, of course, there has been a big change in politics, because many of those areas were traditionally Liberal Democrat. Then there was the EU referendum. Many of those areas voted to leave, and the party definitely suffered as a result. Is that beginning to dissipate when we look at places like Dorset, which I know is not right down in the southwest?
It is a bit, but I do think Labour will say that they are starting to come back a bit in the southwest of England, having been pretty much driven out, actually. I mean, like
Plymouth yesterday was a really good example where Labour, a city that was until 2 years ago run by the Conservatives, yesterday Labour won every single seat except one. It was a meltdown
Johnny Mercer,
for the
who's
Conservatives.
Minister and an MP there,
That's
looking very anxiously at those results in Plymouth.
I mean, Mel Stride, not you particularly, but colleagues like Johnny Mercer, Veterans Minister, in areas like Plymouth, but there'll be other Conservative MPs who now find themselves surrounded, without sounding too threatening, by Labour councils. Now, in those parliamentary constituency areas, I mean, how nervous are they going to be? I mean, you must speak to colleagues all the time, and they must be really worried.
Absolutely. We've got fantastic Conservative members of Parliament who I work very closely with in Devon. We've got great MPs in Cornwall as well. We are taking absolutely nothing for granted. We are working incredibly hard locally. You're right, it went from a real stronghold that the Lib Dems had to that stronghold being broken down. We've seen some patches of it coming back in by-elections, but I think there's all to play for. And in some seats, such as mine, it's not immediately clear who the challenger is, actually, whether it's Labour or the Liberal Democrats.
Well, it may
or
be
the Greens,
where you're... Well, actually, we haven't talked about the Greens very much, because they will be challenging and are challenging you in some council areas on the left of the Labour Party, and perhaps because your policy, your grand policy to invest £28 billion a year in climate change policies, which has really been reversed. I mean, £5 billion, I think, is what you're looking at, and not immediately if you win the election. Well, I mean, that is going to be a strong challenge to you.
In the next election, the Labour Party will be making the biggest offer from any mainstream party on climate and nature ever. So there's a very good offer from the Labour Party for those voters. But we will take on and we will compete with every party that is standing against us. And we'll seek to win. We won't be trying to do deals in smoke-filled rooms to get other parties to stand down to try and help us.
Are you saying that Mel Stride would do a deal with
talk about,
reform?
Doing deals with reform, one candidate standing down the other.
Sorry,
no, but Mel Stride, that did help, though, didn't it, in the last election?
The next general election will be a choice between either having a continuing Conservative government, 5 more years of this chaos, or turning the page and writing a new chapter in our country's story with Keir Starmer as a Labour
How does
Prime
that
Minister.
square with the £28 billion unfunded commitment you made in your area, Steve, that you've had to U-turn on?
Yeah, Liz Truss, as I explained before, crashed the economy.
Economics will know would have been disastrous.
Borrowing to invest can grow an economy. Borrowing to splurge,
But then why
which is
did
what
you
Liz
U-turn
Truss
on the
did,
policy then?
crashed the economy.
Why did you U-turn
because
on
the
the
rate of
policy?
borrowing went up. You can't justify the borrowing anymore. But we will still be putting
So why did you
forward
make the pledge in the first place?
Because at that point, interest rates were less than 1%.
So
your
it was
party whacked them up.
ill-advised to
Your
have
party
made the
whacked
pledge
them
in
up
the
to
first
over
place.
4%.
Yeah, this is my
sending
point
people
about when we get into
mortgages
the general election,
spiralling.
we will have more
You
of these
have added
discussions.
a multi-hundred-pound premium to my constituents who are paying a mortgage because your party is too incompetent to run our economy. That is why yesterday so many people came out and voted for change, and they voted for the change that Labour is offering.
Well, let's have a look. There has been a change here. In Nuneaton, you may remember we were talking to our reporter, Joshua Nevitt, in Nuneaton. Labour were cheering there. We didn't quite have the final results, but Labour have gained Nuneaton from the Conservatives. That's another significant win in Warwickshire. Gained from the Conservatives, 20 seats required for the majority, and they've got it. There's Labour on 20 seats and the Conservatives on 16. But just look at the seats that have changed hands, the number of them. We can see here Labour gained 15 seats. The Conservatives lost 14 and one of them has gone to the Greens. Well,
Jo,
that's an important win, Steve.
But it's part of a story which we're seeing across the country now, which is Labour is doing well, but we're doing particularly well in those areas where there are bellwether seats, key battleground seats that we need to win to form a majority at the next general election. This is another of those seats. It's that same story.
Why is Harlow different then? Your leader went down to Harlow the night before and said that this massive...
I've never seen somebody dress themselves up in so many fig leaves.
We're going to come back. We're going to come back to all this discussion.
If you're so confident, call the general election and
you're
take it on.
Sorry, you're the one that's saying it's a foregone conclusion.
You're doing well.
No,
I've said it's been a very hard... Gentlemen, we've got time. We've still got time for all these discussions. Vicky.
Yeah, the point about the Greens, actually, that we're hearing here that the Conservative PCC in Leicestershire has won, has hung on. But interestingly, so re-elected there, but the Labour vote has been hit by a Green surge. So this is the interesting thing here about the Green Party doing well, very difficult under the electoral system for parliamentary elections, for MPs, very difficult to win seats. But again, what's interesting and what happens when you have one party that's seemed to be very far ahead, so in this case, Labour in the polls looking like they're a long way ahead of everyone else, other people then think, well, I can use my vote. I actually really want to vote Green. I still think Keir Starmer's going to be the Prime Minister, so I can vote Green, I can vote Liberal Democrat. So how these smaller parties perform at a general election and then the damage they can do potentially to the chances of some...
Well, hang on, let me just show you, let's just show viewers what Vicky is talking about. There is the Leicestershire Police and Crime Commissioner result. There are, I think, 37 contests. The Conservative has held it. Rupert Matthews, they're very close, though, very close, the Labour contender. And there you can see the Green candidate quite a way behind, but also doing well, and as you say, perhaps eating into some of the Labour support, because people do vote differently sometimes in local elections to general elections. We'll just show you there the share of that vote, just over 35% for the Conservatives, just under 35% there for Labour, and 13% for the Greens and the Liberal Democrats on 12%. The smaller parties with a big showing, but it is true, it may be different at a general election when, of course, one of the two main parties are the most likely to form a government. Let's get the latest news update with Azida Moshiri.
Hello, here is a summary of the BBC News. Results are still coming in from the local council elections in England, but it's clear the Conservatives have suffered heavy losses while Labour have made big gains. And in another blow for the Conservatives, they also lost the Blackpool South parliamentary by-election. Labour took the seat with a huge swing of 26% from the Tories. That's the third biggest swing in post-war by-election history. Here's our political correspondent, Hannah Miller.
Prime Minister touring Catterick Garrison military base with very little to laugh about. Trying to defend his party's losses after a dismal set of results.
Obviously, it's disappointing to lose good, hard-working Conservative councillors, but we've still got lots of results to come as well. And there are also things that I would point to. Harlow, for example, where Keir Starmer held a rally just on Wednesday saying that was a place that he had to win, to be on track to win a general election. That hasn't happened.
The Conservatives did deprive Labour of a win in Harlow, but they still lost 5 seats and are considering that a success. The party had also pinned its hopes on Ben Houchen remaining Tees Valley mayor, though he wasn't even wearing a rosette. He did thank the Prime Minister in a later show of unity, but warned people want to see more from his party.
They want more progress. We need to give them the excuse to vote for us, and we haven't quite given them that excuse yet.
For Labour, the celebrations are much more widespread, winning 2 mayoralities, the North East and the newly created York and North Yorkshire, as well as securing a seismic win in the Blackpool South by-election, a victory symbolic of their successes throughout the night.
We are winning votes across the country, and that, I think, reflects a changed Labour Party with a positive case to take to the country.
The party also managed several significant council wins, taking Rushmore in Hampshire and Ada in West Sussex for the first time ever.
is duly elected.
But in Oldham, 5 independent candidates standing on a pro-Gaza platform deprived the party of its majority, a trend that may be replicated in areas with a high Muslim population.
The counting is far from over. It will go on into the weekend. But as always, a narrative is emerging. And here in Westminster, the story of these results is bound to impact how MPs are feeling about their prospects ahead of a general election.
The Reform Party recording their best ever by-election result in Blackpool, almost pushing the Conservatives into 3rd place, will do little to calm backbench jitters.
What's rapidly becoming clear is basically, as more people hear us about reform, we're becoming the real opposition to the Labour Party in the North, in the Midlands, in Wales. We're on the way up, and it's quite clear that the Tories are on the way down.
The message from the Liberal Democrats is similar, though we're still waiting for the results from many of their main targets.
A lot of lifelong Conservative voters around the country are looking at this Conservative government and they do not recognise it anymore. They don't speak for them. They're absolutely appalled by the sleaze and scandal that continues to emanate from Westminster.
The Greens may be on course for their best night ever, though again the key results aren't in.
Greens are really now a national force, winning seats in local government in all corners of the country.
But for some Conservatives, their expression says it all, with many thinking they're going to have to put on a brave face ahead of the general election campaign. Hannah Miller, BBC News.
A 15-year-old boy has been found guilty of murdering teenager Alfie Lewis in Leeds last year. The boy stabbed 15-year-old Alfie in Horsforth in November. The 2-week trial at Leeds Crown Court heard his killer, who can't be named due to his age, was armed with a kitchen knife concealed in his trousers. Members of the British Special Forces have told a public inquiry that the SAS committed multiple murders in Afghanistan. The inquiry is examining allegations that the SAS committed scores of executions and murdered innocent civilians, including women and children, during arrest raids in Afghanistan between 2010 and 2013. Donald Trump's criminal trial over hush money payments to an adult film star has resumed in New York. The judge began today's proceedings, clarifying that the former president has a right to testify in his trial. Yesterday, Mr. Trump claimed his gagging order prevented him from doing so. In Brazil, floods have killed dozens of people following the collapse of a dam after days of heavy rain. Over 1 million people are now without power and clean water since the storms began over the weekend. The collapse of a hydroelectric dam following days of heavy rains triggered massive flooding. More than 60 people are still believed to be missing. A Chinese spacecraft has taken off this afternoon, aiming to become the first mission to collect rock and soil samples from the far side of the moon, which is not visible from Earth. It's an uncrewed aircraft, but could pave the way for China's ambitions to put a person on the moon by 2030. The 53-day mission aims to bring around 2 kilograms of lunar samples to Earth for analysis. Mark Clattenburg has stood down from his role as a referee analyst at Nottingham Forest after admitting he had become more of a hindrance than a help to the club. The former referee has been at the centre of two major controversies involving the club since he took on the advisory role in February, first speaking out over a drop ball incident in a match against Liverpool and then criticising the officiating in another game. Now back to elections 2024 with Jo Coburn.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, and thank you for that update in what has been an extremely busy afternoon. I want to welcome our new guest, Katie Balls, political editor of The Spectator. Hello to you, but I think we're going to talk to Carla Denyer. I know it's very noisy, Carla, the co-leader of the Greens in Bristol, an area where you certainly wanted to make progress, but we're going to try and persevere, even if the sound is a little bit unstable. Carla, just before I get you to answer, I'm just going to tell viewers and guests here the state of the parties, and that includes where you are as a Green Party. So if we have a look, Labour, 709 councillors. They've added 115. The Conservatives have lost 272 councillors and are on 273, on course to lose half of their councillors, which would be around 500, because there are still a lot of councillors to declare. Liberal Democrats are up 44, and the Greens are on 66 councillors. They are up 30. Carla Denyer, first of all, your reaction and response broadly to how the Greens have performed.
Well, it's early days for us because many of our target areas are due to be declared later this afternoon or on Saturday, but it's already fantastically promising results for us. We've broken through onto several new councils, including Newcastle, which was our first results, Sefton, and we've also strengthened our presence on a number of existing councils all over England and Wales, places like South Tyneside in the northeast, Peterborough and Exeter here in the southwest.
Right. I mean, we're looking here at some of the figures that are coming through. So John Curtis is saying the Greens are currently averaging 11% in wards they are fighting. That's up 1% on last year, also slightly up on their best ever performance in local elections in 2019. And actually underlining what you've said, you've gained 1 or 2 seats in a lot of councils, but nowhere making big gains. Do you accept that?
Well, I think a lot of the councils where we have the potential to make gains will be coming up later on. As we've been saying in the run-up to these local elections, I think the councils to watch will be places like Stroud, Worcester and Hastings. In all three of those places, we are already part of the administration, but our sense from speaking to voters on the doorstep is that they like what they see and they want to get more Greens elected. One of the other councils to watch will be right here where I am today, my home city of Bristol, where we are not currently in administration, but we do have the largest party by just 1 seat going into these elections, and we may or may not get an outright majority. I think that will be an incredibly good day if we get that, but I am certainly expecting to see gains.
Right, but you will be disappointed if you've only got to get 1 more seat in Bristol if you don't become the majority party, surely.
We're about to commence adjudication.
Well, Bristol is a very pluralistic city. In the last local elections in 2021, the people of Bristol elected a cross-party council, and so we're expecting the same this time. But given that Bristol is switching from a directly elected mayor system to a committee system, and we're going into these local elections already as the largest party, we think that there is a very good chance that we will be part of the administration, and if so, that will be the first core city, so the first of the large cities in the UK that has Greens in power.
I mean, the issue for small parties, or smaller parties, like the Greens, is better representation, broadly speaking, in local elections, but very difficult to break through at a national level. Caroline Lucas is standing down, the Brighton Green MP, at the next election. Do you have any ambition, any real ambition and evidence that you are going to win a seat at the general election?
Of course, and the polls back that up. Polls are consistently predicting here in Bristol Central, where I'm the parliamentary candidate, they're either predicting a Green win or they're predicting a Labour win with a close margin. In other words, it is a clear Labour-Green marginal here in Bristol Central, and it is clear from the conversations we've been having with Bristol residents over the last few years that people understand that it's a Green Labour marginal and that they don't have to worry about voting tactically. The vast majority of voters in Bristol want to see the end of the Conservative government, but they are very attracted to the idea of getting more Green MPs elected because they recognise that the choice they've got here in Bristol is between a likely Labour government where it's 100% Labour and where Keir Starmer can continue to U-turn on policies every few weeks, or a Labour government with a handful of Greens who can hold them to account.
Right, but I mean, Carla, you sort of said it yourself. If you want the Conservatives out, as many of your supporters, you say, want to see, then you'll vote for the Labour Party at the general election. You're not going to vote for the Greens.
Well, it's clear that we're going to have a new government after the next general election. So, but whoever forms that government, it will be better, in my opinion and in the opinion of many voters in Bristol, in Suffolk, where my co-leader Adrian is standing, and elsewhere, if there are a handful, a small group, the next generation of Green MPs there to hold the government to account and to push them to be bolder on the areas where they're not so strong. So if it's a Labour government, that will be things like climate. Obviously, we know that the Labour Party U-turned on their headline climate pledge a few months ago. It will also be on things like decent investment in public services like the NHS. The Greens are the only party that are willing to be honest with voters that we need to make our tax system a little bit fairer, ask those with the broader shoulders to pay a bit more so that we can invest in good quality public services for everyone. We're also the only party that would bring the water companies back into public ownership to deal with the damage that decades of privatisation has done in terms of sewage in our rivers. And voters across the country, across the political spectrum, are appreciating, they share our values, they support our policies, and they want to see more Greens elected.
Carla Denyer, co-leader of the Green Party there in Bristol, thank you very much for joining us. Steve, the accusation there that Keir Starmer has flip-flopped on a number of issues. Well, he certainly, or U-turned, on a number of issues, obviously mentioning the £28 billion pledge by the Labour Party in terms of climate change policies. But, of course, when he stood as leader, he also talked about campaigning on increases in taxation for the top 5% of earners, which would raise some money that could be put into public services. Why haven't you stuck with that, with that pledge? Because, as Carla was saying, public services, she feels, are starved of investment. I know the Conservative government would say differently, but that they need more investment.
Since that time, Jo, the Conservatives have given this country the highest levels of personal taxation since the Second World War. Labour is not going to further increase the burden that the Conservatives have made so unbearable for people. We'll grow the economy and we'll fund public services that way. Now listening to the Green Party there, the minor parties and independents do tend to do better in local elections. But if you look at the one vote that we had today, which was part of a national election in Blackpool South, the Greens and the Lib Dems both lost their deposit, because in a national election this will be a choice between more of the same with the Conservatives or turning the page with the Labour Party. And where the Greens do run cities, just very, very briefly, where they do run councils, I went and visited Brighton while the Greens were running that. And a resident said to me that the streets were so full of litter that the Greens had given a whole new meaning to that old phrase, a dirty weekend in Brighton. So they're not good at running councils. When the votes really matter in a national election, they tend to lose their deposit. The next election is a choice between more of the same chaos with the Conservatives or change with Labour.
Right, but putting up taxes on high earners would raise money. It wouldn't cost money, it would raise money.
Growing the economy will raise money, and that's the way we want to do it. Labour is not in the business of further punishing people. The Conservatives have hurt enough. All
right, let's talk to Andrew Baggott, Conservative leader of Basildon Council. Welcome to you, Andrew. Now, Basildon has gone into no overall control from the Conservatives. Why do you think? What's behind that result? Andrew, can you hear me? I'm not sure Andrew can. Maybe we'll try you again in just a few minutes' time. We can certainly see you, but we can't actually hear you. But let's remind viewers of the result there. As I was saying, Conservatives have lost Basildon, 18 seats to Labour, to the Conservatives 13 and Independents 11. If we can see the number of seats that have changed hands there, Labour have gained 6 and the Conservatives are, well, they've lost 12 and the other 6 have gone to Independents. So Conservative loss there in Basildon to no overall control. Let's bring in Katie Balls while we wait to establish the line with Andrew Baggott there to see what he thinks is the reason behind it. A Conservative loss to no overall control. There's been a pattern of losses right across the country, and a lot of it was expected, of course. And I know we had the Ben Houchen Conservative victory in the Tees Valley mayoralty. But when you look at where the Conservatives have lost councils directly to Labour, what's the mood in the Conservative Party? Those Tory MPs who might be looking nervously around their constituencies in these parts of the country and thinking, I may be at risk.
Yeah, I don't think the mood's particularly good. Now, of course, I think it was pretty priced in, as they would say, that it was going to be a tricky night. But it's always a different thing to say you expect a bad result and as the MP to look at a result which you think could apply to your area, and then you start to do the maths. And therefore, the Ben Houchen victory has obviously given Rishi Sunak a bit of breathing space. It's given him a visit to go to and, make part of it. But what I'm probably most struck by is probably more the silence of most Tory MPs. We're not actually having many come out either way.
No.
And I think that is speaking to quite a few privately because they don't think they have the full picture yet. So do I think Rishi Sunak is in imminent danger? No, but I also think it'd be a stretch to say he's completely out of the woods because a lot of the MPs I'm talking to say they want to wait to see what the results are tomorrow, wait till Sunday. I don't think there is a huge regicidal mood right now, but it's certainly, I think, there's a feeling that these results are pretty bad when you look only at the councils. They're towards the worst end of expectations from those I've spoken to, including some ministers. And therefore, it's best to have some time to reflect on that and take it all in before coming out with statements on what you think the Tory party should do next.
Right. I mean, in terms of that silence, it's interesting. I mean, I think we have experienced that too. We heard from Tim Montgomery earlier, not an MP, but a Conservative Party watcher at Conservative Home, saying that in his view he thinks Rishi Sunak should go. But we haven't heard that publicly from Tory MPs. But what do you think will change in terms of the results between now and the end of play tomorrow? I mean, is there anything that Tory MPs are really hoping is going to change the narrative?
Well, of course, there's Andy Street tomorrow in terms of the West Midlands. And, Labour sources seem to suggest that they think the Tories could hold there. That would be a boost. But again, I think, and I spoke to one MP who said, if somehow, and I think the speculation on London's probably got a bit too much in the sense that no one actually has any idea. But, they said if Susan Hall somehow did it, that would change the conversation to such a degree.
But there's no real evidence so far.
No, exactly. But that's the wild card one. But I think, but I think the problem with the mayoralities is you can talk about them, but they're not too representative in the sense most of the candidates are running on personal reputations. I think they will be seen with the Prime Minister, but they're also a bit more independent, and MPs find that hard to do. So I think it's looking at what is the national swing going to be? What does it look like in terms of the movement and the vote? And I think that's what MPs will be studying a bit closer. Certainly the mayors keeping, they do, if you get Andy Street too, is a bit of a boost to Rishi Sunak, could be a lot worse. But it's not the only thing, and perhaps it's not the most important thing when you think about a general election.
What do you say to Katie Katie Balls saying the silence? There is silence broadly within the Tory party, wanting to see what the results will actually be, but that he's not out of the woods yet, Rishi Sunak, in terms of challenge.
I think Katie termed it, I don't see an appetite for regicide or something of that nature. And I think it's absolutely true. I mean, I sit in the cabinet surrounded by cabinet ministers who are totally and utterly united behind the Prime Minister from all wings of the party. I think the party knows that the route forward for us is to unite, is to face outwards, to talk about the successes we're having in now bringing taxes down, national insurance down by a third, the economy getting inflation under control, the migration, legal migration situation at the moment, the work that we're doing there, the success, early stage successes.
Let's see if that unity. Let's see if that unity is evident in Basildon. We tried once before, but we're going to try again with Andrew Baggott, Conservative leader of Basildon Council, but the Conservatives have lost it to no overall control. Andrew, what do you think is behind the result?
Well, one of the main things behind the result, having spoken to people over the last 3 or 4 weeks, is a real immense dissatisfaction with people on the ground, with what they see, is parliamentarians actually trying to outscore each other, scoring political points, trying to do each other down and stab each other in the back rather than run the country. Time and time again, people said to me, if you get the opportunity to raise this with people that matter, tell them that Essex Man is not going to vote for them until they actually sort their act out. We've got Richie Sunak, who was unelected. We had Liz Truss, who was effectively unelected. You should never got rid of Boris in the first place. This is what Essex Man is saying. And what we want to do is we want to actually see a leader who's showing some leadership that's been elected by us.
Right. Well, Andrew, that's very clear, that message. We have somebody from the Cabinet, Mel Stride, here to answer that. What, you know, why did you get rid of Boris Johnson and give Essex Man... Well, I know, but I'm only answering what he's saying. Essex Man, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak.
You know, we could reprise all that happened under Boris Johnson at the end, and in the end there wasn't a government to be held together. So that was what happened in that situation. The reality now is we have a Prime Minister that is very clearly focused on the priorities of the British people. We know the cost of living crisis has been very difficult, and that's why we provided a huge amount of support, getting inflation down from around 11% to around 3%, getting real wages growing for each of the last 9 months, getting employment levels high, getting unemployment low.
But why is that not? It's not resonating. It's not resonating in Basildon, is it?
All of these things are really important. Where Andrew is absolutely right is that what we need to do as a party is look outward and take Labour on. And as the general election hoves into view, as Carla, it was interesting your interview with Carla, because what she raised was the £28 billion U-turn.
I know. OK, but let's concentrate on the Conservatives,
that's the discussion we need to take to Labour. We need to take the fight to the Labour Party.
I mean, Andrew, are you reassured by what you've just heard there from Mel Stride? Was this about Rishi Sunak's leadership?
But it's not me that you need to reassure. It's the actual people of Basildon.
Yes.
And, like I say, they were very, very clear and very, very consistent about an immense dissatisfaction as what they see as parliamentarians not being very parliamentarian and putting their own interests above the country. They want to see people pulling together. They want to see a common message. They want to see a Prime Minister that shows leadership abilities and actually has the courage of his convictions and will follow through on what he says he's going to deliver. And right now, that's not what they're seeing, and that's why they got rid of us.
Well, Mel, talk to
Well,
Andrew.
I think that what the parliamentary party will take away from these results, and it has been tough in some ways, will be the fact that unity is absolutely what we now need to do. We need to redouble our efforts to get across the things that we are doing. We'll have a manifesto in due course, of course, for the general election to talk more about what we're going to be doing beyond the next general election. But as I say, getting those cost of living issues under control, getting inflation down, getting real wages up, tackling small boats, doing all of those things that matter to people are what we need to continue to focus on, and we need to be outward-facing and taking the Labour Party on, because at the moment they're not telling us much about what they plan.
Is it too late, Andrew?
I don't know. I would hope not. And they say a week is a long time in politics, but without a doubt, there needs to be a far better communication coming out of the government than there has been, because that, again, is where the public feel let down. They feel they're being communicated at, not communicated with.
What do you think will happen in your area in the general election?
Well, based on the figures we had, and it came up time and time again, and bearing in mind we've had a disastrous election result on the back of actually having delivered for 2 years consistently, delivering a low council tax, delivering a balanced budget, delivering a lot of things for people, and they've still decided that they want to get rid of us on the back of the national picture. So it's a call. I know that when I did my own sort of figures on Connect Calling, it was polling at around 60% in theory in favour of us, but 14% said they would vote for the Conservative if there was a general election today.
Well, Andrew Baggott,
that is terribly low.
Well, Andrew Baggott, thank you very much. The Conservative leader of Basildon Council. Apologies if the sound was a little bit shaky, but I think it was pretty clear what Andrew was saying. He sounds really, angry, actually, and let down by national politicians, maybe not you specifically, but Rishi Sunak and national politicians for what's happened in Basildon.
Joe, this has been very difficult, and I know many, many councillors, Conservative councillors, incredibly hard working, and it's deeply distressing when they lose their role and they're unable to carry on as they were before, helping their local communities and the way that they need to do. And I totally get that. But the message that I have for Andrew and others on the ground is that we totally get what's happened. There have been some brighter spots in what has occurred. I think there is all to play for. But if we are going to succeed going forward, we must continue to remain united, which is what we're doing at the moment, and take the fight to Labour. And as the general election comes closer, as we've seen with the U-turns that we're discussing in this panel, we can start to take the fight to Labour, and that's what we must do.
We haven't got long left on this election programme, and we have been waiting for enough data to come in from key wards in these local elections to bring you the projected national share, which I can bring you now. Now, it's not a forecast, it's an estimate of the share of the vote the main parties would have won if across Britain as a whole voters had behaved in the same way as those who have voted in the wards that were contested by all three main parties in this year's local elections. There are the figures. Labour on 34%, the Conservatives on 25%. So 9 percentage points behind. The Liberal Democrats on 17% and other on a pretty high level of 24%. So John Curtis, tell us the significance of those results.
Well, we were saying for much of the last 12, 18 hours that probably we were looking at an outcome and a set of performances pretty similar to last year. And it is indeed pretty similar to last year. The lead of Labour over the Conservatives matches the lead of last year, and to that extent at least is consistent with the message of the polls that the lead of Labour over the Conservatives hasn't really changed, although in both cases it looks as though just about both the Conservatives and the Labour Party are just a little bit doing less well than they did last time, not least essentially because of some of those strong performances by the Greens, by some of the independents, and also by Reform, where they stood. Well, the more disappointing perhaps for the Liberal Democrats and perhaps rather more surprising is that they're down to 17%, which is 3 points down on last year. But it's still pretty much in line with the kinds of figures they've been getting since the EU referendum. So it really is, for the most part, a picture of stasis, no great dramatic change, with, you know, reasons for all parties to ask themselves, couldn't we have done better? But equally also, you know, still leaving Labour in pole position.
Well, so John Curtis, thank you very much. Very interesting there. We only have a few moments left. Well, Steve Reed, not spectacular in terms of comparing to previous years. This is an estimate. People do behave differently. But 34%, 9 percentage points ahead is pretty well where you were last time. It's not getting to the 95, 96 pre-Tony Blair landslide.
I think the key thing that is missing from that very broad brush approach about the national share for local elections is how Labour is performing in those key bellwether seats that we need to win to get a majority in a general election, because in those seats we are performing better than anywhere else, and that's why I believe we're on track to form a majority.
Labour have won the East Midlands mayoralty. Claire Ward has won there, a former Labour MP. Again, another loss in terms of those mayoral contests. For the Conservative Party. Ben Bradley, Conservative MP, leader of Nottinghamshire County Council, has not done enough. Again, looking at the projected national share, that is equal to your lowest ever share of 25%.
So, as I've said, difficult day yesterday for the Conservative Party, no doubt about that, but some elements of this that give some calls for hope, particularly Ben Houchen, particularly Harlow, where Keir Starmer went down there the night before, said we've got to win this, and they haven't. The way forward is to unite and take Labour on as we approach the general election, and their platform becomes clearer. We will have more to deal with.
Well, we've just had that BBC projected national share, putting Labour on 34% and the Conservatives on 25%. That is all we have from my guests here. Thank you to all of you for keeping me company, and of course to all the viewers. You can continue to follow the results all weekend on BBC News. That's what we'll be doing. I'll be back with Politics Live as normal at 12:15 on Tuesday. Bye-bye.